Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 252. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm a little under the weather. My voice sounds strange, at least in my ear, but I've got lots of beverages here, and I think it's going to be a great shoat. Maaz Bin Bilal is the guest. He was the interviewee in the summer issue of Rattle. We're going to talk a lot about ghazals, and we also have our Poet Respond poet right with us right now, Leila Jackson. Before we get in, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on iTunes or Spotify. Anywhere you're listening to this, even if it's live or after the fact, you can leave a review or a comment or something. And all those things help poetry spread around through the magic of algorithms. So please do click something if you would. Like I said, we're going to start out with our Poet Respond poet. And we had a wonderful poem today by Leila Jackson. And Leila is here with us. Hey, Leila, how you doing?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. It's so glad to have you on. So tell us how this poem came to be. What inspired it?
So like a lot of people, I have sort of been following the news, and I'm sure a lot of us have been feeling kind of sad and hopeless seeing all of these things going on. And for me, it was this hurricane that just came and smack in the middle of all of these, wars and debates and elections, and all of these things feel very out of our control, but it feels still sort of in human control. It feels like somebody somewhere, with enough power could stop this. And besides what we could do for climate change, hurricanes are going to happen. They've been happening. They'll keep happening. And all we can do is sort of mitigate them, try to make them happen as little as possible. But we can't really stop them. And so that was just a really interesting thing that I was playing with, how out of human control natural disasters are. And so I wanted to personify that.
Yeah, and what I love about this poem, I love the range it takes. So you really let the rhythm and the music of the poetry guide you. What was the writing process of it like? Was it one of those all-in-one go type of poems? Because that's how it feels. It feels like it's sort of shot out, which I always love.
It did. It did. It did. I wrote it all in one. And then at the beginning, I was thinking about making it just one long sentence. And then I sort of felt halfway through the list format stop. I kind of felt that that was sort of the end. And then I tried to think about, okay, what can I add now? How can I make the voice stronger? How can I introduce this like first person hurricane into this poem? And I yeah, I didn't spend that much time editing it. It just sort of came all the way out and I looked at it and I switched a few lines around and I thought, I read it to myself a few times and I thought that sounds really natural. That sounds
Mhm.
really, it sounds like a big punch.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that the last line is so great. You come across these lines that, on the surface are very simple, but you can just feel like this deep sense of truth that's like the subconscious speaking. And it feels like that last line was that, like just this like, pronouncement of like a basic truth that we all needed to hear. So why don't you go ahead and read the poem?
Yeah, of course. This is There Was No Fire. There was no fire, this time or the next, no rules to ignore, no chamber to load with one round and send spinning, no knife pointing forward, no sirens to duck, no people to swing at the head, no eyes to make any more black than they'd already been. There were no explosions at all, no exit wounds to patch up the messiness for, no lashes or hands that severed other hands. Make no mistake, it was me. I ate the whole thing. I splintered the wood. I grew teeth to chew glass. I cleaned people's clocks till they shone. My siblings said, "How's it taste?" And I called it a banquet and ate the dining table. There was a kick from the belly, a learning to run, an inhale of rain, a feast and the blindness it made. But once I put it out, there was no fire. In our defense, we were starving.
Yeah, such a great poem. Thanks so much for sharing it with us, Layla, and for being a guest today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yep, my pleasure. And once again, that was Leila Jackson with today's Poets Respond poem, There Was No Fire. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Maaz Bin Bilal, so sit tight and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Maaz Bin Bilal. Maaz is a poet, translator, and academic. His first collection of poetry is Ghazalnama, poems from Delhi, Belfast, and Urdu. His translations of Fikr, Taunvis' Partition Diary, The Sixth River, and Mars Ghalib's Persian long poem Banaras, Temple Lamp, were also critically noted. His poems have been translated into German, Hindi, Irish, and Bengali. Maaz was the recipient of the Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship in Writing and Translation in Wales and the Akademie Schloss Solitude Fellowship in Writing in Germany. He holds a PhD on the politics of friendship in E.M. Forster's work from Queen's University, Belfast, and teaches literary studies at OP Jindal Global University. For more on Maaz, you can go to his website, maazbinbilal.com, just his name with .com. And here he is, Maaz. Hey, Maaz, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. I'm doing very well. How are you? You
I'm
seem to be a bit under the weather, I should
a
say.
little bit. I'm in that window where I feel great for the first time in 3 days, but my voice is just not here. So but I think maybe as I talk more, I probably should have done those calisthenics or something, like I have a voice. I think it's already feeling better. When I first said hi on the Zoom,
Glad.
my voice squeaked like I was 14 or something. So that was fun. But anyway, how you doing?
I'm very well, and I hope your voice improves completely very soon.
Oh, thanks. Do you want to start out with a poem?
Sure. So, as you announced, my poetry collection is called Ghazalnama. It has quite a few ghazals, but I thought I'll begin with a poem at least that is not a ghazal. It is about Belfast, though, as is suggested in the subtitle of the collection as well. There are a few poems from my time in Belfast. And this one is called Biryani in Belfast. And I'd like to say one thing perhaps more about the poem before I begin reading it, which is that it refers to it suggestively kind of refers to the colors of the Irish flag as well as the Indian flag, which are common, they're both tricolors in orange, white, and green. And the orange and the green in both cases may be interpreted to suggest sectarian differences, where the white suggests their union and coming together as well. So just with that prelude, I'll read now. This is Biryani in Belfast. To make biryani in Belfast, there are no troubles. You get the ready-made Pakistani spice mix from the Indian store. Follow the recipe and some saffron and chilies and cardamoms, and wallah, there it is. The green enmeshed in the orange rice, even as some greens fail to catch color and remain simply white. It all smells delicious. The brown meat is nicely softened, but also stands out. Thank you.
And that was Biryani in Belfast by Maaz Bin Bilal. And so that gets to some of what your background is, because you've traveled all over, going from India to Ireland. Was it poetry that brought you there? What was your journey into poetry, and how did that get you traveling around the world?
So it's been my journey into with literature. Let's say I think it's not really just poetry, but literature as a whole. My practice as a student of literature, as a critic increasingly, and a scholar. I studied for 3 degrees in literature in India first. I studied at the University of Delhi for a BA, an MA, and an MPhil, and then I came to Belfast for a PhD on the politics of friendship in E.M. Forster's work. So that was largely prose. But Forster himself was a bit of a traveler. He's written one of his most famous novels is, of course, A Passage to India. Many of his other novels are set in Italy. He's written a book on Alexandria, kind of a travelogue as well. Another nonfiction about India, travel of the Hill of Devi. So I ended up doing my PhD work on his writing, the politics of friendship in his work, his friendship with different people across the globe, across classes as well, and so on. And I was interested in perhaps, or at least through my father, I got interested in Urdu poetry in my childhood. And then once I finished high school, and even during high school, I was already more into reading in English, and I was reading English poetry as well. But once I finished high school, I got more properly into English poetry, and then trying to find a voice for myself in English poetry. I went to Urdu and English poetry both while I was writing in English, and got inspired by different traditions. And of course, as you said, my writing and my studies of literature brought me first to Belfast for the PhD. And since then, I've done a couple of fellowships in the UK as well, one in Wales in Aberystwyth, and another in Germany, which I just completed last year, just 9 months in Stuttgart. And all of this was about writing and translation, and I was writing poetry a lot of this time. Currently, I'm in Birmingham, and here too, I've been reading some poetry at small events. And I came here to the UK this time as well to give a talk at SOAS, University of London, and that is about the history of Urdu literature and primarily Urdu poetry there. And then I've been reading my own poetry in English in Birmingham at a couple of different platforms so far. So yes, poetry has been getting me around a bit, but it's also all these different traditions of poetry that I have sort of absorbed, I suppose, in these places. The Irish poet Seamus Heaney and also Louis MacNeice were quite influential on me. And I used to attend this workshop by Kieran Carson, this wonderful Belfast-based poet. So yeah, I mean, poetry does make one travel, I suppose, and it's also part of the travels of the mind. And certain American poets have been quite impressive on me too. So yeah, been a bit of a mix.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem.
I'll begin by reading some of my ghazals now. I think there's a ghazal I want to read, which is called a pithy ghazal. It's somewhat self-reflexive on the form of the ghazal. And I'll just read this one and perhaps talk later more about the form. There are a couple of words here that I perhaps should explain. There's the word kurbani, but that sort of replaces sacrifice, which comes in the line, so that should be self-explanatory later on. There's also dukkha, which is Sanskrit for grief, which is important in the Buddhist tradition as well, and T.S. Eliot used it in one of his seminal poems. So that should be more sort of approachable for people who are familiar with Eliot and that kind of English poetry tradition as well. But I'll begin now. It's called a pithy ghazal. Perfume it, write a rose ghazal. Write for your mate a brose ghazal. In a short and pithy meter, why not try to compose ghazal? Would David now slay Goliath? For lofty themes, a rose ghazal. At the trial of brevity, would you seek to depose ghazal? You would SMS your lover, also in, I suppose, ghazal. Loving her sent me to prison. I sang from the gallows, ghazal. The test of my faith, sacrifice. The test of my faith, qurbani. As my truth, I repose ghazal. So much dukkha, but no action. The answer, my friend, flows ghazal. Best not be born, death second best. Meanwhile, Maaz, decompose ghazal.
Yeah, and that was a pithy ghazal from Maaz Bin Bilal. Thanks so much for sharing that, Maaz. So what can you tell us about? I mean, we interviewed you for the issue, and we talked a lot about ghazals, but not everybody, read that or is a subscriber in print.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about the history of the form, the ghazal? It's one of the most widespread across the globe poetry forms, with a long, rich tradition in various cultures. So what can you tell us about how that developed?
So the ghazal form begins in Arabia, somewhere around 8th century AD, if I remember correctly. It is kind of love poetry written in couplets. But what is unique about this form, as opposed to most other forms of the world, is that each couplet is, in a way, a standalone poem. And there's not necessarily any narrative linear continuity in the rest of the poem, which you might have noticed in the poem I read out as well. So my poem was a love poem too in some ways, but speaking of other themes, and each couplet could be read out distinctively and is not necessarily connected to the rest of it. So it begins in Arabia, begins from certain other traditions called the Nasir, which is like an ode, from where then the ghazal form later evolved. The ghazal word comes from the word ghazal, which is the English word gazelle, so antelope. So it's also refers to, in some ways, it's supposed to have the beautiful characteristics, the daintiness of the deer, the antelope. The antelope's eyes are also sometimes compared to the eyes of the beloved. It's written by the lover, performed by the lover for the beloved. The couplets then, the form then gets taken up in a bigger manner in Persia, in Persian, in Iran, and the Persianate regions of Central Asia and so on. And there the form gets further tweaked because of the grammatical structure. Now there is, at the end of each couplet in the second line, there is a rhyme that repeats itself across all the verses, all the couplets. Only in the second line there's an end rhyme, but the end rhyme is also followed by a refrain, which, if you notice in the structure of my ghazal, was also there. But that comes in partly because of the grammatical structure of Persian, which has a helping verb at the end. The final couplet of the poem also has the poet's pen name. I use my own first name as my pen name, Maaz. So that's there. And from Persia, then it comes to India from Persian, and comes to many Indian languages and gets quite big, particularly in Urdu. It's the main genre of Urdu poetry even to date. Although the free verse has also gotten quite popular in Urdu, but ghazal retains its pride, particularly of performance. And that these mushairas, these almost long-lasting in the night gatherings of poetry, where thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people can gather. It's about 100,000 people can gather. Even like stadiums can be filled just for poetry. I might be exaggerating. There may be tens of thousands. So people gather for poetry, and it's a very participatory kind of space for performance. And these mushaira spheres in our own time, particularly through the South Asian diaspora, has spread back to West Asia and to the UK, to Canada, to America, wherever the South Asian diaspora is. But apart from this eastward trajectory of the ghazal from Arabia to Urdu, and I also inherited into English from Urdu, but also by this Kashmiri American poet, Agha Shahid Ali, who taught at various American universities. He has some books published from the Wesleyan Press and elsewhere, and I think he taught at Ohio and one or two other places as well, and died in America. He wrote very fine English ghazals and commissioned this anthology, Ravishing Disunities, where people like Paul Muldoon and W.S. Merwin and John Hollander and a whole bunch of fabulous American poets wrote ghazals for him, for that anthology. So he took it to America, closer to our own time. But from Arabic, the ghazal was already going to various African languages, in Hausa and Fulfulde, in other African languages. There are ghazals via the Moorish conquest of Iberia. It was already there in Spanish as well. And Lorca has written some fabulous ghazals. He calls them gacelas in Spanish. Earlier, even in Germany, people like Goethe got inspired by Hafiz. Hafiz and Rumi and all the famous Persian poets also wrote ghazals. And Goethe wrote something called the West or Schlecher Divan. So the Divan is a collection of poems in the Persian and Urdu traditions and so on. So Goethe was trying to write poems as well. Some of the British romantics also wrote ghazals. So there have been ghazals in various European languages, and it's really been a major genre of world literature, although it's not often recognized for in all of its wonderful capacities and provenance. But it really is one of the main genres of world literature and needs to be recognized as such, I think, even more strongly.
Yeah. What do you think it is that makes it such a popular form in poetry? Like what elements of it stand out the most? I mean, to me, it's that idea of each couplet being distinct. Is unique to really any other form of poetry. It's so much is narrative based, and we're always telling a story, we're pushing through. But to have it come at from so many different angles opens up a lot of possibilities and has this sort of, this omniscient sort of narrator type perspective where you can see things from here and from here and from here and look at things from all over, which there's a great effect to it. So is that the central aspect that you think makes it the most powerful and successful, or do you think it's other elements too?
I quite agree. I think that's one of the main elements that appeals to people, although there are other elements too that I'll comment upon. But I'll first add to what you said. It's there in English too, but even more so in Urdu and in other languages. Each sher is so sometimes so quotable and it has become part of common parlance. Um, the most famous poet of Urdu, for example, Ghalib, is the most quoted poet in the Indian Parliament. So even in your political sphere, you have shares from the ghazals that are getting quoted all the time. Although India has innumerable other languages, really thousands of other languages and poetic traditions in at least 20, 30 languages, even more languages that are very important and well established. But it is shares from the ghazals, the Urdu ghazals that quoted around most widely. They're part of common parlance. People talk to each other in those couplets. So for every mood, every moment, you can have one couplet from some poet from somewhere that is apt, and people quote it to each other almost as part of conversation. So so this quotability of the ghazal couplet, because it approaches, like you said, can approach any situation or can approach even the same situation from so many different directions, that allows it its great quotability. So I think that's very important. The
Yeah,
other
that's a
aspect of
great
it is,
point. It's
yeah,
something as I post poems on social media every day. Is one of the
right,
things I do. I wake up and put our poem up there, and finding quotes from poems is sometimes pretty
yeah,
hard. When
yeah,
it's a narrative poem, especially, you need the storytelling and the context to have things even make sense. So having those discrete units really makes the poem much more quotable and memorable and useful, I'd say, which is something I hadn't really thought of. But that's a great point.
yeah,
There's that
yeah,
epigrammatic nature of the form,
yeah,
makes it actually have more utility than
yeah.
a longer form, structure.
Yeah, yeah, they are like compounded philosophy, epigrams, like you said, or aphorisms. Sometimes they're like that. Sometimes they're these little comments about small moments of love. So each moment of love that can be commented upon, and part of love is universal to an extent, and love is different types of loves in this that can be found as well. There's a lot of homoerotic poetry as well, although the larger canon is perhaps heterodox, but heterosexual and heterodox as well. But there is a lot of homoerotic poetry here too, and all sorts of love. So and comments about metaphysics and time and just interpersonal relationship, friendship, and so on that can be quoted at any and each moment. But the other part of it that I wanted to add was also its musicality. There's very well established meters in the Persian tradition, particularly, which is kind of the Urdu tradition as well. And so it's set to music a lot as well and sung. And there are these, so while I talked about mushairas earlier, which are these poetic gatherings where poet reads out, but they're professional ghazal singers who just sing poetry by other people and set it to music. And so there are large concerts by ghazal singers that are held as well, who have also popularized the ghazal greatly in the South Asian languages, particularly and especially Urdu. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another. The next one up is a ghazal too. Let's hear that a ghazal for Gaza.
Sure. This is, of course, a more political ghazal, and this one I thought particularly opportune for our time. Although I wrote this much earlier, and this one is there in Ghazalnama, which is my book of poems here, if I may show it. Here, Ghazalnama was published in 2019 in India, and this was included there. I wrote this poem in 2014, when I think it was Operation Edge, if I remember correctly, another war that was on, just as there is a war on in Palestine right now. I wrote this ghazal in response to a video that I saw, a video of some Israeli youth who were celebrating the death of 4 children who had been killed on a beach on the Gaza Strip, and they were chanting in Hebrew, "No children are left there, ole ole." I'll read now. 4 young footballers playing on the beach when men went hunting, praying on the beach. They built castles high up into the skies, children of Gaza playing on the beach. In their grimy games, every grain of sand. In their grimy games, every grain of sand, all plagues of Egypt playing on the beach. Football cenotaphs in place of bodies, their fathers now displaying on the beach. Pulp skulls, rubble and spatter, graffiti. Pulp skulls, rubble and spatter, graffiti, bullet confetti spraying on the beach. Swimmers in that sea, sunbathers on sand, lovemaking, dallying on the beach. We die in protest in New York's, London's. Just stop, please. No more flaying on the beach.
And that was a ghazal for Gaza by Maaz Bin Bilal. I had a whole bunch of questions about the form already, so it's a good time to field those, I think. Nancy Tennell first wanted to know if it's acceptable for couplets to carry narrative thread. Like, is it okay to do that, to have the story told over different couplets or not?
So within the ghazal, the conventional ghazal, you can have two couplets sometimes that can retain the same narrative. So 4 lines can retain the same narrative. But usually a ghazal is not supposed to have a very direct narrative. So even though, for example, in this poem, it is, they're all about the children on Gaza, but they're not still telling a story. Each one is just one image or one idea, and then it's a compounding of that. So there is something called, at least in the non-English tradition, I know there is something called the ghazal-e-musalsal, which means the continuous ghazal. So that can be a long poem, and there you can do a narrative if you want. But that's a slightly different genre. Although formally it's like the ghazal, but it is continuous and it can have a linear narrative. But then that's not your conventional ghazal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you see a lot in submissions, especially. It happens to me all the time reading. I open up a poem, it says it's some kind of form, and then it ends up being there not really very few elements of that form are in the poem. And a lot of times we'll get submissions where the only element of a ghazal is the refrain. So it's just sort of almost like a sestina or something, but you're repeating the same word instead of the 6 for a sestina. And and it's just that word, and that's the only element, and it's still telling a linear story. Would you consider a poem like that a ghazal, even though people are calling it that? And I like to think about we had a who was it that was on? It was a haiku poet. Michael Dillon Welch, who said like haiku is sort of more, instead of like having a definition, it's like a cluster of targets, and if it has a few of these elements, it's a haiku. But if it doesn't have any, then it's not, even if it's like the same shape, And if it has all the elements, then it's a haiku just as much as if it has a few of the elements. But it's like a cluster of targets is the way to think about it. Is that the way to think of a ghazal, or at least a contemporary ghazal, or is it or do you think that it loses so much of itself if it follows a narrative, if it continues, it doesn't isolate the couplets? Is it still a ghazal or not?
I personally do think having these isolated couplets is important, where the first line, the first hemistiche kind of works as an exposition or a question, and the second line resolves that in interesting, witty ways, almost in paradoxical ways at times. It's either responds to the question or resolves the exposition. There has to be some of that, a bit of a question-answer sense going on in each couplet. If each couplet is not doing that, and it's a linear poem which is only divided into stanzas of 2, then it's like any other poem. So I don't think that works. There are people who are taking liberties with form to the extent that they are saying that haiku as well, where the haiku traditionally would have had a syllable count as well, 575. A lot of people don't stick to the syllable count, but the idea of sticking to images of nature or having that kind of 3-line structure still stands. So to an extent, some liberties with the form of the ghazal perhaps are more acceptable than others. So if you are, say, dropping the rhyme and only keeping the refrain, or just keeping a rhyme and not keeping the refrain, but still sticking to the main idea of each couplet being a standalone kind of poem where one line is a response to the other, and then a new thought emerges in the next line, and that is responded in the next line as well. So I think that is essential. And I personally, though, although in most of my ghazals try to follow meter, rhyme, refrain, have the final couplet with a poet's pen name. Even in my last ghazal, actually, there is a final couplet that I didn't read out, which has my pen name. So in fact, that's what happens with the ghazal, and that can and does happen even in mushairas and readings. That sometimes poets, even from the same ghazal, can choose to not read certain couplets because they're not essential to all of it. So, depending on the performance, depending on the audience, you can choose to drop a couplet. You can choose to sometimes even, I mean, there are good poets who can even create another couplet on the spot and recite that. And so, but definitely this happens that ghazal singers or poets, they sometimes drop certain couplets and read only a few couplets from a ghazal because they think those are the most powerful or for any other reason. So it's because there is no linear sort of narrative in the poem. So if you start creating that, then these kinds of things are not possible anymore, and it's not a true ghazal, therefore.
Yeah, well, it seems. I mean, I like to think about the element that makes the thing the most the thing, you know.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that sense of isolated couplets is really what make the ghazal a special form. In the same way, you know, that cut in the haiku makes a special form. So I
exactly.
say, like, a haiku to me, haiku is two worlds in one breath, and it doesn't
Yeah,
matter, you know, the different structure or whatever, as long as you have that like that switch, that sort of change in
exactly.
reality. You know, it's sort of, and that's really holding two things up, or drifting between
Yeah,
two ways of looking at one thing. That's really what makes the haiku work. And in the same way, I think
yeah,
it's what makes the ghazal work, having read a whole bunch. But we have, you know, sometimes you can write great poems using, you know, the refrain and the rhyme, and it's a great poem, so we'll publish it anyway. But to me, I'm always a little bit like, should we call it a ghazal? You know, because so much often somebody asked too if it's a tradition to use the word ghazal in the title, and I think the tradition is to not have titles at all, right?
indeed. Yeah, you're not supposed to have a title at all. And even in Ghazalnama, I kept titles, but I'm putting a second collection of ghazals together, and I've taken out the titles from each page as well. I might have mentions or something like a title, which is really the refrain on a contents page. But in the original tradition, in Urdu or Persian, ghazals don't have titles. They're listed in the collection by alphabetically by the letter on which they end rather than on which they begin. So the last letter of the first line is how it's sort of listed in on the contents page and arranged in the collection also like that. So yeah, they don't have titles in the original at all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's sort of more like labels when you even have a title, you know. But which makes me wonder though, if we have, you know, ghazal on this and it's not actually that. I wonder if I should actually include that in, you know. But I let the poems go. I'm not a very hands-on editor. I let people do what they want. Um, let's see. So let's read another one. What's
Right.
next?
I'll read this ghazal, which is a dual ghazal, and so good ghazal to explain what we've just been talking about as well. The fact that each couplet is a standalone poem, and that they don't have titles necessarily. Although this one, when it used to have a title, this is again published in Ghazalnama, and why I call it a ghazal is because it's two ghazals that I've merged into one, but they can be read separately as two ghazals too. So in Ghazalnama, I've printed them both ways too. That they're printed at first as one long ghazal, and then the two ghazals are separated again and then published separately. Although here I'll read them together. And what I mean by two ghazals being merged together is that you'd realize that every alternate couplet has the same rhyme and refrain scheme. The whole ghazal has the same meter. But there will be two maqtas, so two final couplets with both having my name. And while they work well together like this, being merged, they read well together separately too. So if you were to pick up Ghazalnama and go back to it, I'll not read them separately right now, but and to read them separately as two poems, they'll still make sense to you. And over here, they'll make sense to you, I hope, as a single ghazal. The refrains here are Amaltas Monsoon. Amaltas is the name of the Indian laburnum. In many of the Indian languages, it's called Amaltas. So that will be one refrain. The season of Amaltas is really the full refrain. Monsoon is in by the monsoon. Sorry, monsoon is the other refrain. Yeah, monsoon is the name of the rain-bearing winds we get at the end of the summer. So from about June, they hit India, but they begin they begin in the Arabic Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and so they affect even West Asia or the Gulf and all of South Asia and so on. And both our summer and our rains are monstrous as well. They're very welcome at some level too, but they can be very destructive. They're immense. We have some of the hottest temperatures in India. We have, and perhaps this is not very widely known, we have many people think it's the tropical forest where it rains the most, but it's actually a couple of spots in India, again, which are affected by monsoons, where the most rain falls in a year, the Cherrapunji and Mawsynram in the Indian state of Shillong in the northeast of India. So that's just to emphasize the power of the Indian rains. One other thing, this poem was written when the police was cracking down on certain student protests, as is again happening in large parts of the world, including America right now. But this was happening in Delhi at the time, at a university. And I happened to be at that university at the time. I wasn't studying there, but I was there. I was falling in love with somebody at that university at that time, I thought. So that's where this poem comes from. I'll read now, if I may. Crusts over hearts may bake in the season of Amaltas. Hard souls, though florid, ache in the season of Amaltas. Then unbearable yellow blooms are drenched by the monsoon. The thirst of Qais's solitude is quenched by the monsoon. Qais is this archetypal Romeo kind of lover from Arabia. I'll read this stanza, this couplet again. Then unbearable yellow blooms are drenched by the monsoon. The thirst of Qais's solitude is quenched by the monsoon. In that blinding yellow haze, those inflamed passions we raked, we would change the sun's make in the season of Amaltas. How could the rain then dissipate what desire did create? How could water douse the raging fires belched by the monsoon? Delhi's very own harvest. For the soaked lover, what rest? Crackdowns on protests take in the season of Amaltas. Is thunder, lightning, will revolution be frightening? Or will all beauty, romance now be wrenched by the monsoon? You're out to pick roses at times of laburnums, Maaz. They'll know you're a fake in the season of Amaltas. But think of it again, Maaz. Could this be your final stance? The yellow florid fleece may yet be flinched by the monsoon.
Yeah, and that was I guess Crust Over Hearts might be how we'd refer to it without the title, by Maaz Bin Bilal. Thanks for sharing that. There was a little bit of talk about the rhyme in the chat, and I guess some people aren't picking up on the fact that the rhyme is buried in there. Like there's the whole refrain, which can be very large in an interesting way. I think, in a way, I think a lot of times when the refrain is like a long phrase, it makes the music work a little better even. And so in this one, you have like parched souls, though florid, ache in the season of Amaltas. And then later down, we would change the sun's make in the season of Amaltas. See, so that rhyme is the make and the ache, way back in the middle of the rhyme, and that makes the refrain just sound so much more like salient. It's like it's powerful in the music of the poem. So you hear that over and over and over again. It's a really strong refrain when it's written like that. But so that's where the rhyme is. Do you think a rhyme is a really important component of that? Because that is the thing. The rhyme and the refrain are what link each maybe discrete couplets together. It's like the thread of sound that like holds them on like a string of pearls, as somebody said too.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things happening here. One is that there's a certain difference that's happening between the Oriental, the Eastern languages and the European languages, English particularly, that the syntax is different. So in the Eastern languages, you have the verb coming at the end. And in some of them, there's a helping verb which comes after the verb. And this tradition of having the rhyme and then the refrain comes from Persian and Urdu, where uh, there's a verb and the helping verb, and the helping verb is often constant, and the verb is where the rhyme happens. So because of that, there's a certain incantatory effect, this thread that runs through the ghazal, the kind of the pearl that runs through that sort of strewn together, um, that works in the ghazal. And how this gets performed at those mushairas is particularly interesting. That a poet, even though they're reading a ghazal, if they're reading a ghazal that they've written for the first time to an audience, uh, the audience tries to almost guess because it already knows the refrain and it knows the sense that the shade is making so far, the couplet is making so far. Then it tries to guess at that rhyme word. So it becomes a kind of a guess word where the audience almost echoes you. It sort of chants the share with you, or and guesses at how the line will end. So there's some joy, some anticipatory joy in that guesswork as well in of the ghazal. So that's how it works, particularly in the Eastern languages. But I think when you come to English and other European languages, this different of the syntax of having to have certain objects or nouns towards the end, and those then becoming your refrain. So monsoon or the season of Amaltas in this poem, for example, uh, then I think there is a slight difference that results qualitatively in these European language ghazals and the Eastern language ghazals. That there in the Eastern language ghazals there is an even greater ambiguity and openness because the rhyming is happening with verbs, and the verbs can be very different, and the refrain is just the helping verb. So there's not a lot of meaning that's attached to the repetition in itself. Whereas here, the repetitive word, the refrain, is often, because of the syntax of English, by necessity, it has to be certain nouns, certain objects, or something like that. So that sets the overall mood and image and theme of the poem in a way that is even more ambiguous in the Eastern languages. So I think there's a bit of a difference of that is happening here. But I think I've spoken more about the refrain in all of this. So your question was really about the rhyme before that. So my apologies about that. But
No,
I think
that's
yes,
fascinating, though. And just to explain for people who might not have understood what we're talking about, there's sort of two different ways syntactically, like the really base way that we construct sentences are. And in Western languages, mostly, in English in particular, it's subject, verb, object is how we do it. So we'd say, like, I ran home. But in other languages, it's subject, object, verb. So you would say, I home ran. And then having the refrain, the repeated word, be like ran instead of home. You know, home is like a physical, concrete thing. So it sort of forces you to write about that thing, you know? Whereas an action can be applied in so many different ways. So it opens up a lot more possibility, is what we're talking about. And it's just so interesting to me, the thought of, like, can we really appreciate a ghazal in English when it's so different because of the way the languages work? I keep bringing it back to haiku, but, you know, in the same way, you know, English is a stress time language, and in Japanese is a moritime language, and so they have this sense of, like, how long you've been talking your sentence is, like, how the actual duration of it. And so what haiku really is, it has nothing to do with syllables, but it's 575 mora, and the whole point is that it has the first and last line of the haiku are missing two of the seven. So it's sort of like the silence of those two missing moments is sort of what are filled with meaning in the haiku. But can we even appreciate that as native English language speakers that don't hear mora, you know? And so it's just altered so much to translate it into a language like English from the ghazal form. Because the you know, it's just so different when you make the action the thing that's repeated rather than the substance of the sentence, the thing of the sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly spot on. And metrically too, in from Urdu to English, let's say, there is. I mean, what I do at least, or try to do, is to stick to the stress meters of English, but the Urdu meter is quantitative, so it's the length of each syllable rather than the stress on it. So there are longer syllables and shorter syllables. So it's and the sequences there are more varied. There's a wider variety of meters that one cannot quite replicate in English to the same extent. I feel because here it just stresses and to arrange them in those kinds of orders is not always possible. There's a wider variety there. But yes, like you said, I think something interesting does happen, although it also gets limited when the refrain has to be an object rather than a verb or a helping verb. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just also fascinating to really dig down into all those differences in the ways that language functions, which is what we really do as poets. We're playing with all that. Let's hear another poem.
Right. I've mostly kept ghazals for today. I'd only kept one non-ghazal in the beginning, so it's another ghazal that I'll read. This one has the refrain "restless." I don't think I have to explain anything here. This is one of the first ghazals I ever wrote, so this is quite old actually. Right. I make the promise to forever be restless. We have the nebulous stars, destiny restless. Where do I search and find her God in this wide world? Heisenberg's particles all mutiny, restless. Shall I pine away, fall dead, grieving endlessly? Rivers flow, bees gather, all their honey, restless. These are metaphors of water, wavy bodies, fickle fluid flowing in a flurry, restless. You come not, and I wait. I keep biding my time. With no reins, the peacock won't dance, surly, restless. We were together in raging storms, powerless. Delhi was romantic too, when rainy, restless. What of my love, our passion, your indifference? What of my love, our passion, your indifference? The earth, oceans, very heavens, break free, restless. I try find meaning in God, her person, in words. I hear nestlings call for food from a tree, restless. Right away, add on to the surplus words. Who gives a damn, O Maaz, if you'd be restless? You're muted, I think, Tim. Sorry.
Thanks, Ari. Yeah, that was another ghazal from
Yeah.
Ghazalnama. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
I'm coughing a lot, but I'm hitting the mute button a lot, so that's good.
Right.
I don't think I messed up, but that was a mistake. But yeah, let's see. Just look at some of the commentary talking about. I mean, it's so interesting talking about this form. One of the things I noticed is that sometimes as you're reading, you repeat the first line of the share with like a different stress or a different like
Yeah.
way of saying it. So you say it twice, and I'm wondering about that. How much of that is, what is the purpose of that, and is that a traditional way of reading?
That is very much a traditional way of reading. In fact, I'm doing it much less than say Urdu poets do it. They would do it far more. They would just stress on one shade and its first line many times, and then sometimes. I mean, that's also responding to a live audience because it's usually done to a live audience. You also because there's a lot of compounding. I think that's why it happens because each shade is it should be complete in itself. So there's nothing before or after except the rhyme and the refrain and the metrical continuity that's kind of retaining or that's continuing. Or coming from before. So there's no background to it in a way. So because you're introducing a new thought, I think it also needs to be left dangling in front of the audience for longer for them to ponder upon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when it has its best effects. In fact, as I mentioned in response to the first question that you asked about my travels, uh, in Birmingham here, where I am for a couple of months, just a couple of days back, I read two ghazals at a poetry jam open mic kind of event. And there you have limited time. So, of course, in that kind of event, and that's the English way of reading also, that you go there and just sort of read through a poem from beginning to end, and that's that. And so, in 3 minutes, say I read two ghazals, and I read them just in one flow like that, without pausing, without repetition. And I feel like in that way, ghazals don't register best
Mm-hmm.
because each couplet is a it's just one unique thought. So I think it needs to be emphasized. It needs to be left with the audience for longer. There needs to be greater pauses. You're talking about the pauses in the haiku, but here too, I think it's important for us to allow the reader, the listener, with the time. I think with each couplet. Last year I had a reading in Berlin where I had much more time to myself. This was like a bigger platform at the House for Poesy. And so there, I was able to actually repeat much more, and I think that's been my best reading so far ever. That since we had more time, so I think just leaving the audience to sort of ruminate more over each couplet, or at least the ones where you want to emphasize something. I think that is important to you as well, or where you think there's more possibilities of meaning, so on. I think it works better to sort of have some repetition in his performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great effect that it creates. I mean, it builds like sort of tension every time. It feels like you're, in a way, like when you have that couplet feel, it's like built like inhaling and blowing up a balloon and letting the air out, Right. And so there's this effect when you repeat it where you're blowing and then you're blowing again, so the balloon gets like bigger, and then maybe you do it a third time and it's bigger. It's a really neat thing to do, only possible because of the structure of the form. And you can really feel, you can hear how that would be in a big audience, how that would, because you're all sort of hanging on the breath of that, the energy of the room would build up, or the stadium, as it were. You mentioned that mesheras that have tens of thousands of people. Does that still happen? Because one of the things that I've always feel like is, technology has like slowly replaced a lot of the uses, a lot of the functions of poetry, because it was, mimetic devices are trying to remember story through poetry, and being able to share and converse. And now we're living this digital world where those kind of things and entertainment too are being replaced. I mean, if you can have, a concert with a, band that's doing all these flashing lights and bells, and you have all the huge amplifiers and stuff, there's so much more sort of stimulating than sitting and listening to poetry. And so those things just keep replacing poetry more and more. Do you find so are there still like really, well attended mesheras like that with that many people?
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, like I said, with the diasporic community, there's a lot of huge musharas that happen in the big American cities and Canadian cities as well as Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and in India, Pakistan, and even Bangladesh and elsewhere. They're huge in New York and Chicago, I'm sure, and many of the Californian cities, to LA, San Diego. I'm sure there must be huge musharas happening. In fact, even in English, there's a South Asian Language Association. I've only been to America once, and that was to present a literary criticism paper. This was at a South Asian Literary Association seminar, and that time, and it's a sort of a roving conference. It travels around America every year along with the MLA conference. So that time it was in New York, and they also have a kind of a small mushara at the end of it, but that's a much smaller one. But the big ones continue to happen, and I think why they remain important is that it's not just the poetry itself, but there's a whole sort of etiquette and then a way of conversation that's associated with it. It's how the English word, I suppose, could be compare, or the main host, how they conduct the mushaira, how they sort of introduce a poet, how they then move on from one poet to the other. Even as the poet is reciting, the tradition is such that a lot of praise also is oral. So even the host will keep praising the poetry. The audience also repeats, like I was saying, verses. Mm-hmm. And a good poetry and a good sher particularly is one where the audience repeats lines. So it's not applause is not just clapping. The real praise is verbal. Hmm. So and people will get up and say wah, wah, which is like wow, or shabash, which is excellent, or something like that. Like a lot of the praise will be verbal, and there'll be witty repartees sometimes between the audience and the poets, between the poets, amongst the poets themselves, or between the poet and the host, and so on. So it's a kind of a performance of it's the apex of that culture and its performance, verbal performance. There's a lot of emphasis still on the verbal, on conversation as the best part of that civilization, and poetry being at the top of language and discourse and communication itself. Uh, what is happening though is there's a couple of changes that are happening. Most mushairas are now recorded. So if you go to YouTube and you type mushaira, Mushaira, you'll get hundreds of hits, and those and you can try to. They'll not be in English. Most of them they'll be in Urdu, so you might not be able to comprehend most of them. But even if you played a few minutes, you'd get a sense of the performance and the participatory nature of the performance. So there is that. But the other side of it is, and a lot of higher, sort of more orthodox critics of Urdu or sort of the savants of high Urdu culture will say that the standard of the mushaira has fallen. So the standard of the poetry being performed there is very increasingly more and more populous, which is not considered a good thing there. So in terms of language and so on, it's catering, it's sort of playing to the gallery, basically. It's becoming just more language of the street and so on, and it's not high language. But then that's always been a debate with poetry, I think, of various kinds. And in a way, in the West, I see it playing out between what are called the page poets versus performance poets and so on. So I think it's a bit of that too. So the mushaira now is taken more by what would be called the performance poets exclusively in the West, let's say, whereas the page poets are more critical of the mushaira, although the binary doesn't exist as such in the East. So there are no words for page poets or mushaira poets. Everyone is a mushaira poet to an extent. That people do go to mushairas and recite.
Yeah. Well, I should say, if anybody's enjoying this conversation and how much you're learning, please do click the like button. It's that time of the show where I say we've got twice as many people watching live as have clicked like so far, and it does help if you would. Also, if you have any questions for Maaz, we got a little bit of time left. Leave them in the chat windows on Facebook or YouTube, and I will pass them along. It helps if you put the word question in bold so I can pick it out of the commentary quickly. But let's hear. We have three ghazals left, I think. Maaz, do you want to read ghazal for Adrian Rich?
Sure. So this one does not rhyme. It does not have a refrain. It doesn't have a fixed meter. This is, as the title suggests, it does have a title. It's a ghazal after Adrian Rich. Adrian Rich wrote a bunch of ghazals, I think, in two short collections. One is called Homage to Ghalib, and I think the other is called The Blue Ghazals, if I remember correctly. So there she retains the central idea, as Tim pointed out, of the sher being or the ghazal having this component of the couplet. The couplet is called the sher in many Eastern languages. The sher is comprised of two lines, where the first is an exposition, the second is a response in a very inventive, sometimes paradoxical way. So that's what Adrian Rich retains. She does not retain the meter, the rhyme, the refrain, the poet's pen name, nothing. So that's what I've done in this one ghazal that I kind of wrote in honor of her ghazals. I did like her ghazals, I must say. I'm not sure if the purest ghazals, but they retain some essential idea of it, and they are very good, I think, as poems. My poem refers to Edna St. Vincent Millay, the American poet you'd be familiar with. Also, this Renaissance artist, Gentileschi, Artemisia Gentileschi, a woman artist, late Renaissance. So she's often, in a world of men, ignored. But she has this very powerful painting where she uses this myth, Holofernes, Judith slaying Holofernes, a woman slaying this man and chopping off his head. And she made the head to look like her own art masters. Tassie was the name of that master. And she had earlier complained against Tassie of having raped her. And she was the one who got punished for making that complaint, and Tassie was never punished. But she created these two powerful paintings, actually, of the same scene, where Judith is slaying Holofernes, and the head is that of Tassie. So those were the two references I thought I'd point out. Ghazal after Adrian Rich. He loved my spirit, my mind, my body, he proposed. Then he became conservative. We lived a world apart, a river of fire sped between us. To think of his warmth now makes me shudder. I love films, he often slept during them. I wonder how I looked in his dreams. Sleep is the luxury denied to the pauper. I weave my wings into the choker of our lives. Edna Millay forgot the lips she had kissed. Gentileschi beheaded the Tassis of her life.
And that was Ghazal After Adrian Rich by Maaz Bin Bilal. And you can see in that poem, the way that the most important feature is that distinct units of the couplets, because it still feels, we get that same, the energy, I think, as you're reading that poem is the same, because that's really the heart of the form. Let's see, there's a question from Evan Leslie. It says, Evan says, it seems that ghazals often contain questions, perhaps a byproduct of the couplet lines and dialogue. I'm curious if there's another historic reason for the frequent occurrence of questions.
So there's a lot to be said about the ghazal, and sometimes I forget what I've said earlier. So when initially you asked me about the ghazal and its origin and tradition, I think I said it's a love poem. I pointed out the reference to the deer, the ghazal, the antelope. But I think I forgot to say another meaning or interpretation is conversations with the beloved. So it is conversation essentially. So each two lines is kind of one conversation. Now it can be conversation with the beloved, it can be conversation with God, it can be conversation with the self, and particularly the last couplet of each ghazal normally is supposed to have the pen name of the poet. So it's kind of a meta conversation with the self. You're almost looking at yourself from outside or asking your alter ego a question and so on. So because questions are essential to conversation, I think, therefore questions are also essential to ghazals. So often the first line will have a question in it and the second will be a response or an answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's do, we're sort of running up on time. We have two left. Let's do It Wasn't Our Destiny next.
Right. This is a translation of an Urdu ghazal by somebody who I really idolize as an Urdu ghazal poet, Mirza Ghalib. He is arguably the most popular Urdu poet. So this is a kind of homage to it. Adrian Rich also called her collection, like I said, homage to Ghalib. Ghalib is this major Urdu ghazal poet of the 19th century. I'd like to argue he's the best poet of 19th century. Apologies to Whitman and many others, but but I do think he's a tremendous poet. I don't think there's any reference here that I need to explain. Yeah, so I'll begin reading. It wasn't our destiny. It wasn't our destiny to be with our lover. Had we lived any more, the wait would have been longer. I live by your promise, knowing it to be false. Wouldn't I have died of joy if I were a believer? Through your caprice we learnt that the pledge was weak. With such ease would it break if it were any stronger. They should ask my heart how your half-drawn arrows could pierce it through, and where they get their power. What friendship is this that friends become counselors? What friendship is this that friends become counselors? There should have been a healer, a sympathizer. Blood would pour unstoppably from the veins of marble. What you believe to be grief may be scorching fire. If this torment's heartbreaking, where'd we go hiding? If it weren't the pain of love, it'd be of our career. To whom do I complain of this sad night's refrain? Death wouldn't be too bad if only once it were. This dishonor on death, why didn't we drown instead? There would have been no tomb, there would have been no bier. Who can see him? He's one, the monad. Were there any duality, our four eyes would bear. These matters of mystic thought, these renderings of yours, Ghalib, we'd call you saint, were you not a drinker.
And you see the way that the structure in the translation, that subject, object, verb, issue changes the way that you're able to translate the poem, right? So that was, I still can't get over how difficult it would be to translate where there's a refrain on the verb, but you can't do that. So it just seems like one of maybe the most difficult forms to translate into English.
Yeah, if you want to retain form, it is very tough. I have translated some 10 odd ghazals or more, slightly maybe 15, 20 ghazals. And I've not managed to retain the form fully in quite a few of them, but in some I've tried to the best of my ability. But here, then you have to work with different objects that you have to rhyme rather than a single helping verb. So when you were explaining the syntax earlier, if I may just add to that, so it's not just that I home ran, but it's almost something like I home uh, running was or something like that. So the was then becomes the refrain right throughout. So I apple eating was. So the was will be the refrain that will remain the same, and the ing, the eating, the running could be the rhyme or something like that, right? So it's easier to do it if you have that kind of a structure where the verb endings are similar often. And you can have the helping verb as the refrain. But here then you have to make different kinds of objects rhyme, and you have to maintain semantic fidelity to the original in the translation. So it has to be the word in English has to sort of be the correlative of the word in the original language. So it's you have to have that word there, but you also have to make it rhyme. So it's not always possible. Sometimes one can only do free verse translations, but then you lose the form at least to an extent in that. So it's a bit of a judgment call. You have to take what works best where, and not all poems are translatable. I think therefore certainly not all ghazals are translatable.
Yeah. You mentioned, how popular, poetry readings are in India, and made me wonder about the state, how much or poetry. Somebody mentioned that they're familiar with a lot of ghazals being spiritual, and how much is it being used politically nowadays? I mean, one of the interesting things, especially reading Poets Response series, we get submissions from India and all over the world. And one of the really interesting things is there's sort of similar structures going on as far as like political strife. I mean, in India, there's a nationalism sort of movement, conservatism, and then pushback against that. And there's a lot of that going on. And there's a sort of heightened politicization sort of everywhere in the world, which is really interesting to see. Is poetry being deployed in that? Like, are there a lot more political poems going on in India? Because this form, the ghazal form, does feel like it lends itself to that. Because you mentioned, with the isolated couplets, they're really repeatable and memorable, and they can become slogans really easily. It seems like there's a lot of effective use politically that those could have.
No, that's spot on, Tim. And even from the time of Indian independence, the freedom struggle against the British, it was Urdu that was the language that was seminal for sloganeering and poetry, which was nationalistic, perhaps in a good way at that time, about the freedom struggle and against the British. But what is happening today then is, like you said, is a certain kind of rightist nationalism that is dominant in India. Islamophobia in India is very, very wildly kind of active too, and it is across the world. And there is this logic or sort of a false rhetoric, I should say. There's a false rhetoric of Islamophobic false rhetoric that claims that Muslim men particularly try to woo women from other religions, Hindus particularly, and then try to elope with them, marry them, whatever, and so on, so as to be able to convert them. So, so against all of these things, there's a lot that's happening at the Mushaira, the Urdu Mushaira, particularly in the Ghazal form, at the political level also. I translated this contemporary poet who passed away during COVID, sadly, Rahat Indori, who was very popular for having written some remarkable poems against tyranny and so on. I wrote his obituary as well. But even in my own English ghazals, and the first one that I read out particularly, maybe if I'll just go back to a couple of verses there, the test of my faith, sacrifice, the test of my faith, Qurbani, as my truth, I repose ghazal, and the verse before that, loving her sent me to prison, I sang from the gallows ghazal. The rhetoric that I was referring to, the Islamophobic false rhetoric, is one where, and the term used for it is love jihad, that Muslims perform love jihad. And that certain provinces have passed laws against it. And Muslim men can be easily persecuted for being guilty of having performed love jihad in that sense. So they are wooing girls from other religions and marrying them and converting them and so on is the argument, which actually decried against by many human rights agencies, but it's still practiced. So in some of my own verses, and I do come from a Muslim background. So when I write these love poems, uh, coming from the Urdu tradition, the idea is to also sort of take a kind of pot shot, perhaps, at these false narratives, and to freely uh, sort of perform this kind of love poetry, and emphasize the freedom that love should be able to access, but also the freedom that love demands.
Hmm. Yeah, well, really well said, and it also again shows the form because you're attacking something from so many angles. You can have a lot of variety between them, and some can be, like you said, like pot shots at the political
Yeah,
structure, and then the next couplet is completely different, just back to love, you
yeah,
know. And
yeah,
so it's really interesting to see how that plays out and how effective that can be. We're up on time. Let's read the last one that you have for us, and this is
yeah.
the one in Rattle.
Yeah, it was indeed. It's quite a new poem. Many of the others that I've read are quite old by now. And this one also, I think, I don't think I have to explain anything except one word, which I will in a minute. But I'd just like to say about this poem that I think India, which is greatly pluralistic, is a place from where I come and from where I think this poem comes as well. Because being an Indian, I think it just makes it quite convenient for me to write a poem such as this, and you'll discover what it is once I read it out, because it's sort of so infused with pluralism and so many different traditions that I can claim as my own. And there's a word here, wise, which comes originally from Arabic, exists in Urdu as well. Wise is a religious preacher in Islam. So that's one word I think that requires explanation. The rest should be apparent. So I'll begin now. Um, how can one ever begin at the end? Death is regeneration at the end. Wise lives piety, prays 5 times a day. He knows not the joys of sin at the end. How do I sin? I'm no Catholic. How do I sin? I am no Catholic. I will have no confession at the end. I'm Muslim, but don't bow at the mosque. Will he give me salvation at the end? Try, but you cannot kill me. I'm Hindu. Try, but you cannot kill me. I'm Hindu. I have reincarnation at the end. Please bury me next to the synagogue. I too face crucifixion at the end. The pharaohs built palatial pyramids. They'd go in style, they'd reckon at the end. Don't burn, don't bury, sink me in the sea. Mars, no commemoration at the end.
Yeah, such a beautiful poem.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
poems all day,
Thank you.
Maz. Thanks so much for being a guest and for sharing
Thank
all
you.
your knowledge about ghazals in particular, because it's something I just think it's one of the best forms of poetry. And so anytime we can
My pleasure.
explain why it works and help people write them in a way that's successful, I think is a nice thing to do. And but it's great hearing your poems too, which I don't know if we've said enough, but the beauty that you weave through these delicate topics and the condension of the music, I think, in the ghazal form is really wonderful. So thanks for being a guest, sharing these poems, and talking about it all with us.
I'm so glad. Thank you. My pleasure. Yeah.
Yep, take care. And that was Maaz Bin Bilal once again. You can find more about Maaz at his website, maazbinbilal.com. That's MAAZBINBILAI, or sorry, MAAZBINBILAL, maazbinbilal.com. So now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem set on a specific road or path, kind of inspired by Aaron Murphy's poem last week, I-95 Corridor. And remember, it's a one-page max for poems, so only one page. But if you have a poem you'd like to share, email it to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com. And then join the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy on the chat windows on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're watching on X, go find YouTube so you can find the chat link if you want. Because I still don't know how to add to the comments on X while it's streaming. It makes no sense. But anyway, Find the Zoom link. Join us if you'd like to share a poem, a prompt poem. And again, it can be a poem from this prompt or any previous prompts. If you're, you have one from a couple weeks ago or months ago or whatever you'd like to share, feel free to do that too. Again, it is a one-page max, and email your poem ahead of time to promptlines@rattle.com. And we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Now we're joined by our Prompt Poems editor, Katie Dozier, live from Las Vegas, as she is about to compete once again on day 2 of the World Series of Poker. Hey, Katie. There you go. Hey, Katie. How you doing?
I am doing great. I am also doing this on my new laptop for the first time, so I almost violated the cardinal rule and had the stream playing as you called on me. And I was like, no, I will not do that.
Well, yeah. So pretty excited about playing poker there in the big tournament. Did you find time to write a poem this week?
I did find time. I feel like I've got to challenge myself. I really want to write a poem while I'm playing. I've never done that while playing live, and I feel like I should do it today.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I think, if I posted one of your videos from 10 years ago, you playing 40 tables at once. So playing one table, I think you can squeeze time in between.
I can squeeze time in, although it's a little different playing live where everyone's staring at me. I'm going to pack my sunglasses. Today's going to be a little bit more serious as you get deeper in the tournament. People are less chatty and less fun. My first table involved people quoting Legally Blonde to me, so that was a lot of fun. But day 2, people are really getting kind of serious, so I guess I'll get serious too.
Yeah. Well, the problem for this week was to write a poem set on a specific road or path. And for some reason, it didn't occur to me that this is what you would do. But obviously, there's a very, very clear one that you can do. So what did you pick to write about?
That's how I felt about too, because I was like, what am I going to write about? Oh, this is very obvious. I felt like I almost, some of the prompts I feel like I end up writing to specific rattlers, like the Brian O'Sullivan, write about your ancestral home when he was on a trip to Ireland, and this one I almost feel like I threw up to myself. So, okay. The strip. There are lights, and then there are lights. A kaleidoscopic street so shiny that even the asphalt has to blink. The moon has touched down. A sphere that size couldn't resist the pull of this slot machine of a town. The blue eyeshadow of a peacock struts by, and I've been alive long enough to see this Ferris wheel take flight. Along the way, a loss of lives, ambulances. The upside-down plastic bucket drumbeat of strip scuttlers, shouts from frozen drink guzzlers, the top-down selfie takers. But when the fountains erupt, all of us just fall in glitter before it's dust.
Yeah, really well described there in the strip.
Do you remember it was with you that we saw those awesome guys banging on the upside down plastic buckets?
I remember. That's great street performance. That really was.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wonderful poem. So vivid and concise too. I loved it.
Thank you.
All right, and now for mine, I being under the weather a little bit, I thought I wasn't gonna be able to do anything. I was a little worried. Had a lot of brain fog going on, but then I had an idea. I'm also getting tired of my own voice or my own sense of I don't know. I'm bored with myself a little bit. So I wanted to
I'm not bored with you.
Oh, well, thanks, Katie.
Sorry. Go ahead.
but I do. I feel like I've written about my own personal stuff a lot. So I thought I'd try a new project. And so this is a whole new project. I won't really tell the details about it. You just have to see it unfold maybe as the prompt poems go on if I keep going with it. But anyway, my poem is this. It's Route 32. If you were here on the warped wood of a porch, in the spilled yolk of another early morning, the sound that you'd hear between the sips of homegrown hibiscus would be the hooves of the herds of deer tap dancing over the bones of the old interstate. It might sound like rain landing in a tin can, a Morse code in your ear pressed to the other end of a wire's tender mile. Or it might sound like your mother unloading a drying rack in the next room, the occasional ceramic clink to the rhythm of her own sweet time. Time is all there is, and the deer seem to know it. Their wild number's another word for impatience. It's then you'll remember waking up in the back of a Dodge sedan, spinning on the center line of a country road. When the car came to a stop, 1,000 eyes hovered in the headlights. Your friend up front honked the horn, but the deer stood, pinned to the moment, until finally you clambered out, stomping and shouting them free. It was only then that they ran, every direction a swirl of wet velvet. That's how we were when the fires came, quick, the empty saucers of our faces full of milk for the flames to lick. So that is Route 32, and I think this is going to be a narrative type story going on in poems, and so that what's going on will be revealed slowly is what I'm trying to. I've always wanted to do stuff like that, and I've never succeeded. So
I love the empty saucers of their faces. That's a wonderful line. Now every time I see a saucer, I'm going to think of Tim Green's poem. Thank you. I see a lot
thanks,
of saucers.
Katie. And so you've picked your poem of the month for the month of June, but that poem could not be here. So we decided to postpone it until next week. So we're going to and we decided, we're going to wait till, are we going to wait till next week after next week to post it too? I can't remember.
Yeah, to publish it too. Yeah, we're going to wait on that. But I am allowed to say it will be a familiar face.
Oh, a familiar face.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Familiar face.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
then also, I'm...
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm going to be listening to, but I'm not going to be able to come to the end because I'm going to be riding off to go to the World Series of Poker right at the end of the show. But I'm still going to hear everybody's poems. So you're pumping me up, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, well, good luck from everybody, I'm sure, in the poker. We definitely understand that you're going to be listening, but can't join because you've got a lot of stuff to do. And it starts at noon. It starts an hour and a half. You got 90 minutes.
Yeah. And I'm very lucky that this was the early show so that I could still be a part of it and get to hear all this inspiration, getting to hear all those beautiful guzzles leading up to this too. It's really nice. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. So just a reminder too to everybody, keep yourself on mute until it's your turn. And if you're watching the stream, if you're still watching YouTube, which is nice because you can see the poems, make sure you have YouTube on mute because there'll be a time delay. Otherwise, and we got a lot of new faces here too. And what you want to do pretty much is when we call on you, you share your poem. Then you can go back to the YouTube stream and just watch that because it's the best place to see it because you can see the poems too at the same time. So share your poem, then jump off the Zoom and get back to the YouTube stream. And don't have them both running at the same time, especially too because of bandwidth. You know, if you have Zoom going on and YouTube and you don't have a super fast internet connection like mine, then there can be it can make the connection worse too. So anyway, let's go we'll just go in the order of people coming on as we always do. And first up, and I'll say bye to Katie Doder too. Bye, Katie, and good luck again. Hope everybody does wish her luck. If you wait a little bit, wish her luck in about 2 hours. Then she'll actually be playing and she'll get lucky cards because that's how it works. So, yeah, so she's waving bye. All right. So let's go to Brian O'Sullivan first.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Brian. Great to see you. Quick on the draw this week.
Too. I am kind of shocked and gotta put my poem up.
Well, I still have to. I forgot to log into the promptlines@rattle.com email address. So,
okay, got it.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so, I've got your poem now.
All right, cool. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
So I kind of remixed some things that I've written about before, including from a demi-sonnet workshop that Aaron Murphy did a couple of weeks ago for One Art, but then I used the new prompt as a kind of frame for it. So it's called The Oracle of Roads, 3 demi-sonnets.
Okay.
1. The Cross Island Parkway, near exit 28 in Belrose, ran by the St. Greg's Auditorium and the convent with its 2 green grass, and by the old railroad tracks in Pigeon Town, the fenced-in underpass that harbored young drinkers. and it ran by my corner, sounding a soft static, so that silence for me is the loud absence of that traffic. 2. Yet another quiet drive back to my campus. My dad leans forward, squints, and smoothly crosses 2 lanes on the Cross Island Parkway. He clears his throat. It's all about knowing when to stay in your lane and when you can get over. Was that a metaphor? I'm still not sure. 3. Haloed in sunlight on a screened-in porch in Lilydale, my medium, Simon, told me he saw 2s and 4s around my dad. I told friends those lucky numbers would be my father's signal. Then the medium said my mom was happy I was thinking of making poetry out of our Irish family history, while my father worried about a bump in the road, which he'd indeed find dire. Later, driving too far left in Dublin learning poetry, I blew out my tire.
Yeah, that's great. That was the Oracle of Roads, and I remember that story, Brian, from their trip to Ireland. And great use of the demisonant form. I mean, we'll show it again, but that's a form that Aaron Murphy, last week's guest, invented. A demi means half, so it's a half sonnet, 7 lines. And the only rule, really, you have 7 lines, and then there's a rhyme on the last word that's sort of hidden somewhere up above. So, we have traffic static in the first couplet. Sure, your maybe, or I'm not sure which one that is, but there's some rhyme in there. And then the last one, we also have tire and dire. So great use of that form, sort of a double homage to Aaron Murphy. Thanks for sharing that, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was Brian O'Sullivan, so I'm getting the right thing up there. No, this one. Okay. That was Brian O'Sullivan with the Oracle of Roads. Stephen Croft is next.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen. Great to see you.
Thank you. Hopefully Zoom will be more friendly to me this week than last week.
Yeah, it was I think there was like a problem actually going on with the Zoom itself, because it was like not just you, but it was like everybody, or maybe like the local node for me from Zoom that I was connecting to was wrong. Like something was wrong that was like affecting everybody for a while, but we're good now. You're great. Look good.
Okay, sounds good. My poem's going to reference traumatic brain injury during the war in Iraq, which these events for me were 20 years ago now, which and I'm glad they're in the past. My unit in Iraq lost 26 soldiers, but very many more were severely injured. This is a case where being macho, not wanting to be sent back, not wanting to leave the fight became pitiful, and I witnessed this. This is the road of 6 IED strikes. I stare out a bulletproof square of glass, the familiar broken buildings dotting all the sand-colored streets of Husseiniya, while he tells us he hasn't slept for 7 days. We slide along a canal cut from the Tigris into an open vista of farmland. And he tells us his suspicions about his fiance's fidelity, not with the half I don't care humor of many soldiers, but spitting words half bitten with paranoia, an ongoing monologue that really says nothing, like wolves circling the edge of a bad dream. And I think of the rumor in the tent told in low tones that he will be held back when he goes home on leave, put on rear D, which is rear detachment, by the way. And I think after 6 IED strikes, more than any of us, more than anyone could stand, God, let it be true. Let his war with insurgents be over. Let the dysfunction of buried bombs that blew the air from his lungs and thoughts from his brain 6 times as they tried to reach him through the shaking iron carriage of Humvee armor become a memory, like the now settled plumes of exploding sand that carpeted ballistic glass with darkness as they reached 6 times for the sky under his bad star. Since his war with swirling psychological ballast and mind-bending frustration is now just beginning.
Yeah, very powerful poem, and very important too, Stephen, for sharing that. Those experiences are just so traumatic, and then so much of the general public just has no idea like what that experience is like. So poetry, can do a lot of. Yeah,
I appreciate that. I was in a Zoom class with Brian Turner that I know you've had on the show before at St. Leo University, and he talked about the need to move away from that trauma and write about other things. But what happens, I think, with post 9/11 writers is that they circle back. They always seem to circle back, and that happens to me too. I have a poem about Ukraine just recently, so that circling back, it just happens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And Brian Turner, that was episode 216 of the Rattlecast. One of the best episodes. I think it's really one of the great episodes. If you missed that one, go back and watch that with Brian Turner at Rattlecast 216. But thanks, Stephen, for sharing that poem. Really powerful stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Take care. That was Stephen Croft with The Road of 6 IED Strikes. Next up, let's go to Nivedita Karthik in India. And it's a much better experience probably for Nivi. It's like before bed instead of really early in the morning. I think if my time zones are right, it's like 11 o'clock there.
On the dot. It's 11:10 p.m.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you, not having to come in.
It was finally great to catch an entire show live after so long.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I wish somehow the world was flat, so then we could not have this problem of time zones. But it's great to see not having to be at work. So what do you have to share for us this week?
I have a poem about a path, but it's not a path in any specific place or anything of that sort. I think I went metaphysical again. So it's basically the route that I think many of us take to writing a poem. So I've just titled it The Pathway to a Poem. I mean, it is a specific path, just not a physical path.
Definitely. I think that definitely counts. Let's hear it, Nivi.
The pathway to a poem is not a straight line. It begins in silence, a thought grazing at the edge of consciousness, a fleeting whisper in a crowded room. It wanders through memories, picking up fragments of conversations, the color of a sunset long forgotten. It stumbles over emotions, tripping on the raw edges of grief, gathering the dust of everyday moments. It lingers in uncertainty, dwelling in the space between words, in the pause between the next thought. It finds form in fragments, in the cadence of a footstep, in the pulse of a moment. And when it arrives, it is not with fanfare or flourish, but with the quiet certainty of a thought fully formed, a whisper turned to song.
Oh, I love that, Lindsay. That was great, and a great explanation of the path to a poem, and a great extended metaphor, too, for that. Thanks so much for sharing it.
Thank you, Tim. Hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, you too. So is Nivedita Karthik with The Pathway to a Poem is Not a Straight Line. And next, let's go to another guest who has a much more reasonable time, Siobhan Brownlee. In France, where she is, it's like something like 6 p.m. maybe, and usually she's coming on at like 3 a.m. So what time is it there in France?
It's 7:30 p.m.
Okay, so, not bad. Yeah, that's very reasonable. So glad you could join us. So what did you write about this week?
I just wrote about where I live and the street where I live, but it is quite an interesting place because I live in the city of Le Mans in the Old Quarter.
Oh, and you've included a picture too. So for those watching on,
yes,
those watching, you can see the street here, and it is a cool street.
So the Old Quarter is houses and streets from the 14th to the 16th century. Okay, and so it's a Hyben. So I talk about me walking along the main street, then into the street where I live, and it's called Dropped into a Coat of Arms. Postcard picturesque, narrow sloping streets, cobblestones, a cathedral spire, intricate patterns of painted wooden beams on half timber houses. It's the Old Quarter. See the stone slabs. People used to shelter from the spokes of passing carriages at the side of those stones that lean against the ochre-coloured house walls. Pulling my shopping trolley along Main Street, La Grande Rue, I tread the uneven paving. Church bells announce a ghostly market day. I hear echoes of strident voices of craft workers, merchants, and peasants from bustling centuries ago. These days, it's quieter, with strolling tourists who slowly gaze around. They are fascinated by these dwellings and passages of a long-gone world that are still here in the midst of our metallic electronic present. People are lunching in quaint restaurants, and cats slip by who revel in this no-car zone. Radiant blue and patches of grey in the sky, I'm looking forward to my brie, cheese and whole wheat bread. Then, turning into my street, Rue Saint-Pavin de la Cité, yuck, I smell a dog's poo. Flies buzz around the shiny black mass located near the middle groove down the cobblestone street where once medieval waste gathered. To the sun are bound lengthy shadows, pigeons coo.
Oh, that was wonderful. You really transported us there, Siobhan, and there's that image again. I always love a
Yes.
hymen too. Really, really wonderful stuff. Thanks for taking us there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, that was Siobhan Brownlee with Dropped into a Coat of Arms. And yeah, the one of the things when I moved to California was that there's like no history here. It feels like there's not old buildings. You know, there's the missions and that's about it. Whereas in Rochester, New York, where I grew up, you know, we had houses that were from the 1700s at least. And then I was thinking about what it'd be like to be in Europe, where there's you know, houses that are 1,000 years old sometimes. Let's go next to Christiana Doucette, who came on for the first time last week and is back again. Great to see you, Christiana.
Hi, thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, definitely. So what was it?
The poem,
Yeah, what was the road that you
yeah, go
wrote
ahead.
about?
I wrote about the road that was between my house where I grew up and the library where I used to work. And I just have very vivid memories of each winter, what happened there, and that stretch of road between my house and my job.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to read that.
Okay, let's hear it.
Rushton. They never paved 9 Mile to 8 Mile of Rushton Road. They left it to gather muddy holes in the spring, dust craters in the slow summer that spit on your freshly washed car if you forgot and took the shortcut, and pits of soft leaves unseen till too late in fall. Occasionally they'd grade with gravel. A lone truck would travel by, a dust storm, coating drab white houses in yellow-brown grit that gets to the back of your throat and sits there. It might toss a rock through your windshield as you yield to the roar bearing down, the four-wheel drive rushing to arrive who knows where. But in the winter, the road changed. Brown to gray, ice filled the holes, rilled the rims, building up layer by layer of snow like an aunt painting over last month's wallpaper. Rushton Road turned slick, quick with black ice. You'd grip the steering wheel, willing the slow slide straight as tires on ice break, the swing of car fishtailing across solid sheet. Eyes meet cars, ours, yours, size each other up, both in a slow motion swing around the curve. A swerve will start your corkscrew, end you in a ditch by the fluffed cattails with a long walk to the nearby farmhouses. No, you begin to brake at the beginning. Let spinning wheels enjoy the ride, enjoy the slide, embrace the space of never knowing where you'll stop, when you'll stop, if you'll stop, or if you'll hop the ditch into the swamp and have to tromp home, boots sinking into gray-brown snowbanks that cut through jeans like Grandpa's chainsaw at the woodpile spitting splinters. Winter roads won't listen to reason. It's the season of soft touch, light turn, slow burn, and clutch.
Oh, really wonderful sounds and imagery there, Rushton. Thanks so much for sharing that. Really wonderful poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Christiana Doucette with Rushton. And looking at the Zoom, we have a lot of people online, so I'm going to try to go as fast as we can too. There's 18 people on the Zoom still, and I want to get to everybody. We're going to definitely get to everybody who's on the Zoom. We always do. I'll sit here as long as it takes, and I love having you all. I'm going to try to find go to first-time callers soonest though, and I think Terry Jude Miller's never been on before. I believe. I think it's probably a little late for Terry usually. Hey Terry, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. We're just waiting for the hurricane to reach Houston.
That's right. So it's speaking of that burl, like that the opening poem had. That's headed your way and our way too, I guess I should say. We're not in Houston right now, Katie and I, but we will be next week. So hopefully not too bad. And how close are you to the coast? It's one of those. It's not a huge hurricane, right? So it's like mostly storm surge issues and rain, or is it
about an hour? By the time it reaches us, it'll be greatly degraded.
Yeah. So what did you write about this week, Terry?
So this was the celestial prompt from a couple
Mhm.
of weeks ago. I've been fascinated with Matt Rasmussen's Black Aperture. Uh, Both he and I lost brothers due to tragic circumstances. And in the current state of the world, I have Ukrainian friends, I have Russian friends, I have Jewish friends, I have Muslim friends, and uh, trying to understand and put that in the context of who's good and who's bad. So that's what this poem's about. It's titled Event Horizon.
Okay.
If there is a heaven, it is Gaia BH1, the closest black hole to Earth, 1,560 light years away, with a mass of 9.6 times that of the Sun. It keeps its secrets well, dark veil to which spirits zoom through eternal vacuum, mouth open, enlarging, welcoming new ghost to a circumspect afterlife. No one is refused. Both saint and sadist, both believer and unbeliever, all are welcome to this place of all endings. No light nor matter escapes, no measurable signal emits from its silence. There is only one way to discover what lies beyond its aperture. Heaven, some say, has no size, no dimension. But if the celestial theory is true about Gaia BH1, heaven is 10 times the size of the sun.
Oh, very cool poem. I love that extended metaphor of the celestial bayou, that prompt from a couple weeks ago. Love that line, the description of a black hole as this place of all endings. It's really wonderful, Terry. Thanks so much for sharing that and for joining us. It's cool to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Terry Jude Miller with Event Horizon. And let's go. We have another first-time caller, also in Houston. Evan Leslie is here.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Evan. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. So you wrote Houston in your Zoom, so we know that's where you are. How close are you? Are you worried about the hurricane coming in or not?
I'm not at the moment. I live right in the middle of town in the Montrose neighborhood, if people are familiar with Houston. So I think we'll probably be okay.
Uh-huh. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I really, not being there, I haven't really seen it too much about what the impact is going to be. And originally, like a couple days ago, it wasn't even going to make it that far. It was going to hit the very bottom, maybe, of Texas. But now it's keeps going, tracking more and more north.
Yeah, I know. It's been pretty unpredictable.
Yeah. I guess as they all are. I never spent any time really at all around the Gulf or in the southeast. So I have no experience with it whatsoever. I mean, grew up in the Northeast and live in the Southwest. So anyway, what did you write about this week?
I think first of all, thank you, Tim, and thank you for this community of writers. I've been listening to y'all from afar, just as a podcast listener for quite a while.
Great.
So I'm really pleased to be here. And I think I made a couple rookie mistakes. One, I have a poem from last week's prompt and that one's a little longer than a page.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got another poem. I don't know. There's two there, and one is about I-45 here in Houston, and that one's the second poem on the screen.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, no mistakes at all. And you mentioned in the note too that the submittable is not available. It's something we should have said. The first bit of the month before Katie picks the poem, it can't, because if we change the drop-down menu on submittable, it erases all that data, and so it makes reading impossible. So we keep it closed and keep everything the same. I'll be updating it after the show for all the July prompts. So, there's really no reason to submit them yet anyway, because we don't read them until, well, Katie, I guess she reads them throughout. But anyway, but so this is the freeway in Houston, I-45. Why don't you take us there?
Okay, all right. So this is a poem I'm a bit of a rookie poet, but I love Gerard Manley Hopkins, and I was reacting to one of his really sublime poems. So this is called Houston at 2 a.m. I-45's lanes still sprint, rhinestone-studded, towards the Pennzoil building. Like a gardener's neck, a hustler cheek, Here, the night sky smolders Pepto-Bismol, pink and honking, charged with grandeur, a warm and humming sweat-soaked hug, moss scent rich as a puck of skull, big red cinnamon through the rolled down window. And though they strobe, numb, these dizzy days like pavement lace from live oak shadows and light, beneath our traffic moaning stews an ancient buzz. Mosquitoes bite to gift us itch, and, thank God, to strike our dearest freshness, blood.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, thanks so much. Definitely transported us there. And that's a place, you know, the 2 a.m. on the I-45. I've actually been a lot because a lot of times the flight when I'm flying back to Houston comes in late, so I Uber over on that freeway from Hobby. So it's really felt familiar, that Pennzoil building and things like that. Thanks for sharing that, Evan.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, and good luck with the hurricane. Hopefully nothing bad happens. All right, that was Evan Leslie with Houston at 2 a.m. And next, let's go to, we have more first-time callers on the thing. Let's go to Leslie Pichet.
Vous m'entendez?
Hello. Yeah.
Do you hear me?
I can. Yeah, it's great to have you on. So where are you calling from?
Quebec, Laval, near Montreal.
That's wonderful. Yeah, well, so glad. I think you might be the first person from Quebec we've had on, so it's great to have you.
Oh, really?
It might be.
So happy to find you.
So what do you have to share today?
I'd like to read Cosmogony. It's about the moon, the earth, and the start of it was this kind of little piece. It's an eraser.
Oh, really?
And when you turn it, it makes a kind of little delicate. So, cosmogony. The world is a sharpener, turns its face, its lace. Flakes rumble water awls, strands of male and female DNA, a old spit of faded trinkets. Then, found of silts, the wheel, the altar, remains this opaline moon that gravitates around, orphan and without a cradle.
Oh, beautiful poem. I love that. What was the title again?
Cosmogony.
Cosmogony. Yeah, very
Cosmogonia. Cosmogony.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. A beautiful poem. I love the sounds of it.
And it sounds even better in French because the you know, it's exactly what we heard with your poet today. The sound of the language, of the main language, you know. So this is the difficult part when you have to write in another language. For me, it's very hard to write in English.
Definitely.
Why? But so interesting.
Yeah, Douglas Silver says everything sounds better in French, and that might be true as well. Thanks so much, Leslie, for sharing that poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just found it. It's Cosmogony by Leslie Pichet. Let's see. Next, let's go to Linda V.E. Crawford, another first-time caller.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And
yeah,
where are you calling
I love
from,
Rattle.
Linda?
I'm in California, in Los Angeles.
Ah, right down the hill from me. I'm up in the mountains of Wrightwood, so not too far away.
And it was just serendipity that I landed on prompt lines. I am familiar with Rattle, but prompt lines, I just wasn't aware. I kind of looked at that, and then I saw that you had the ghazal poet and etc. And I just thought, oh my God, the prompt, a place you've never been.
Ah, that was a while ago, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was June, and it hit me, and I just started writing free flow. So if you have my poem, A Place I've Never Been, that's that's the one that I
Great.
will
Yeah, I
read.
do.
Like,
Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
okay, fantastic. A place I've never been. Does a hot air balloon count? Or the far side of the moon? A trip inside my granddaughter's mouth as she rolls Mandarin or Spanish off her tongue, the chances of learning Chichewa gone? What of my dream of white skiing, lost in the knowing of a young friend's broken ankle? My imagined pain as bindings failed. When she invited me, my fear said no. Slopes cannot be as filling and round and sharp, not as wondrous as the mound of my firstborn's head as he pushed. I didn't hear him when he cried out, or a cord is choking me. We traveled the long, sweet tunnel to Margie Adams' Naked Keys and tumbled into the cramping of Keith Jarrett's Death and the Flower, serenades during passage. Such are the places you can only travel once. I've never traveled inside me. A balloon in the sky cannot moisten my skin, nor regulate my breath into a steady strum, nor sing of the universe. The let-down scent of a baby's cry tugs me to feed, to cradle, to love. Such a scent can never be replaced by a hot air balloon.
Oh, that was really wonderful. I love that such are the places you can only travel once, and the way that the poem moves through, the good movement in the poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Linda.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. So that was Linda V.E. Crawford with A Place I've Never Been, and hope you come back soon, Linda. It's always great to see you. I mean, normally it's at night, though. I should note it's early because of the guests being in England, but normally it would be... usually prompt lines come out around 6:30 our time. Let's go next.
It was just great that I was able to 9 a.m. to join in. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. Yeah, let's go next to T.R. Paulson, who again with the early time I think is more able to join than normal. Hey, T.R., how you doing?
Morning, how are you? I was actually planning on joining tonight, and I tuned in late because it all of a sudden dawned on me that it was at a different time.
Well, gotcha.
So I was excited about the ghazals, and I mean, this PR poem this morning, the Leila Jackson poem was absolutely sublime.
Yeah,
and
it really
I haven't
was. Like
been
those
blown
kind
away.
of poems that are more abstract and go, they I don't know, let the subconscious go somewhere interesting and unusual. They're pretty rare. It's really cool to have a poem like that went so far.
Yeah, I haven't been that blown away by a PR or any news type poem in a while. So I was actually writing you an email about it when I realized, oh shit, I need to tune into Rattlecast.
Well,
oops, but I'll have to watch it later.
Well, glad to have you. And so what do you have to share?
I have a poem in response to the road, and it's a first, well, maybe not a first for me, but I rarely read unpublished poems and readings because I don't like my own first drafts very well. And plus I like to promote the journals that promote me, so I prefer to use reading time to promote my published poems and journals. But this one is from a potential chapbook I'm working on, which the prompt was perfect for because the chapbook is about my favorite Woodside route.
Oh, very cool.
And there's a road called Bear Gulch Road that's on that route. Sacrifice. From a UPS driver to her dispatch guy after breaking her own rule to never make friends with anyone in management. Bear Gulch bends, an asphalt snake through mists to gated blends of green. I find her ends and she knows me. Redwood branches twist her fog wet as blood to my hands. She mends me, holds my empty. I animal my trust, alone among her world. Her words, her wild branches and needles blurred in sunset rust. She names me beautiful, untouched, beguiled. You dangle Bear Gulch close as breath, but never make her mine. I falter faith. Your numbers burn me bare and black with want. You give her to drivers who don't love her. Encumber me with sleepy streets. Your godship uproots as friendship, bruised as fallen fruit.
Oh, wonderful sonnet, Sacrifice. I'm really looking forward to this chapbook, TR. I always love books that are about, some kind of like career that you don't have. So getting the insight going along that route on Bear Gulch, really cool. I'm looking forward to that chapbook.
Yeah, you've published a couple poems that would potentially be from that book, but I don't know. I'm having like this one. I read it and I think, okay, well, no, it make no sense to anybody that doesn't already know me. So I have to deal with all of that.
I don't know about that.
Maybe I'll get some comments.
I really
liked
it.
Or suggestions or ideas of what's actually working. I don't know. But always good to be on. Good to see everybody.
Always good to see you. Yeah, thanks so much, TR.
Thanks.
Yep, that was TR Paulson with Sacrifice. Let's go to Rob DC next.
Oh, hi, Tim.
Hey, Rob. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me on. These days, I end up edging towards memoir in these poems. So this one was a path I took when I was 8 years old. So it started off as a free verse and ended. I was 3 pages into it and realized it didn't work. So I decided to make it a prose poem, which fits better on the page.
Oh, very nice. And a Haibin, too.
Yes. Well, by the time I finished the prose poem, I was overcome with an irresistible urge to throw a haiku on it. So.
Well, that's great. I think Katie Dozier always says every prose poem should just be a Haibin. Maybe that's true.
It is a Haibin. It is a Haibin of sorts. Anyway, take me to the river. I'd walked the path many times with my granddad and knew the way. Now I was 8, old enough to go fishing by myself. We lived deep in the country. I could walk all day and not meet anyone except farmers I knew, so it was safe. Plus, I was a good swimmer. Old gravel pits and the river were not reasons for parents to worry. I remembered to make lunch, a banana and honey sandwich and a leftover chicken leg. My mum gave me a chocolate bar too. Next day I went to our compost heap and dug until I exposed the worm layer, scarlet, orange and wriggling furiously. I put a bunch of them in my bait tin, grabbed my backpack and fishing rod and set off down the lane. I looked over to the hayfield. The ancient elm, its branchy silhouette shaped like the world. I paused at the bank of white violets planted by my great-grandmother for the fallen in World War I and cut through the hedge to the 40-acre field. I went along the hedgerow as far as the tumble of brambles, blackberries. After sampling the right berries, I took the footpath parallel to the lane, said hi to the donkeys at the rescue farm, and emerged back at the lane next to the cook's bungalow with their peacocks strutting on the roof. The birds screamed at me as I went down the hill past the Ulvers, the first people in the county to buy a television. They had shown my mum and me the tiny flickering black and white pictures. I liked the radio better. Then I turned the corner, and there it was. The sinuous snake of the Great Ooze, curving back and forth through the fens of East Anglia with its head gnawing at the North Sea, its skin decorated with water lilies and fringed by yellow flag irises, speckled with ducks, swans and moorhens, overseen by stately grey herons. The snake was always alive for me. I swam in it, paddled, rowed, sailed, cruised, and hung out on it or beside it during all my growing up. That day, I found my fishing spot and settled in, at one with the slow-moving current. Bygone summers, all paths lead to the river.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Love that, and you can really feel the way the Haibin form works in that poem. Love the 2 haiku in the break that those provide against all the vivid details of the prose. Really wonderful work. Thanks so much for sharing that, Roderick.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
See you next week.
Yeah, wonderful poems. That was Roderick DC with Take Me to the River. Next, let's go to, this might be a first-time caller. That's the name Rachel. So I'm not sure. Let's see if I find who that is. Hey, Rachel.
Hello. Sorry, I'm not very good with Zoom. Hold on.
No, you're great. It looks
Okay.
great. Yeah, we got the sound, we got the audio, so we're looking good. And where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Moreno Valley.
Ah, so that, yeah, not too far away from
So
either.
pretty
Down
close,
also down
yeah.
there, even closer, actually. Yeah.
I just wanted to share my appreciation for not only like you and Rattle, but everyone who shares. It's definitely helped me feel a little more comfortable sharing.
Oh, well, that's really wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that, and so glad that you joined. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very nervous, but hopefully I can get through it. So my poem is called Tote Cutoff.
Mhm.
It's for the poetry prompt.
Yeah, and there's a
And
picture,
the
a
tote
map
cutoff,
here, too. Mm-hmm.
yeah, because I figured no one would know of it. It's a road in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. And it's a road that I grew up on. So
Oh, wow.
here's my poem. Tote Cutoff. 125 miles till you hit the T in the road. The $1 Million Camp, a junction between Alaskan routes 1 and 2, a junction between hometown routes and canopies of old growth trees. A blur of deepening greens flashed before the Wrangell Mountains. John Denver sang of a strong and gentle people living there amongst the spruce and caribou, the kind that take care of their own, unless there's a stone to be thrown. The wild calls for a truce. Between life and death lies guarantee if you forget to feed the cast iron barrel stove. Winters here are cruel. Nature lacks the mercy of this gold mine town. Faces I hardly recognize now. As frost heaves up pavement, leaving potholes when I try to recall my childhood, a blur of familiar scenes of fireweed, snow-capped peaks, moss that fades on memory of being more than a snowbird lured by the midnight sun.
Oh, that was wonderful. Yeah, excellent reading, too. Thanks so much. Tot Cutoff. And it must have
Thank
been
you.
so interesting to grow up in Alaska that remotely. I mean, so I think
Yeah,
there are a lot
it's-
of interesting poems to write about that, probably.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, it's a huge difference in Southern California.
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
bet. What was like the population of the area?
Like maybe 1,000.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very cool.
So pretty
Excellent.
remote.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, and I really appreciate you joining. Hope you come back again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, that was Rachel Venezuela. I should have said from with a Talk Cutoff. Very cool poem. Definitely transported us there. And Mary Lisa said, if I want to get to other people first, since there are a lot of people who can't usually, I will. Thanks for saying that, Mary Lisa. We'll get to everybody, though. And if you stick around the Zoom, we're going to get to you. I don't have, I like to get it to everybody. And maybe at some point we'll have to start filtering and only allowing a few people, restricting the time we end. But I'm good to go for a while. Let's go to Kathy's, it says Kathy's iPhone. And it's Kathy, let's see if I can figure out who that is. But hey, Kathy, do you want to share a poem? Are you there? Going once. Going twice. Oh, maybe not. Let's see. Instead, let's go to... yeah, I think we've got everybody who's not like a regular. So we have... let's go to Bijwajit Mishra next. And if Kathy's iPhone wants to come back on, I don't know. We'll see. But hey, Biz, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Sorry about the cold. You sounded when you opened, I said, "What's happening?" You just woke up or what? Then you say,
Well,
you
the
got a
thing
bad
is,
throat.
Katie's, my kids are at their mom's house this weekend, and Katie's in Las Vegas, so I didn't have any reason to talk, and I felt so good compared to yesterday and the day before. That didn't even occur to me. So now I feel a little bit more normal. But when I opened my mouth to talk to Maaz, when he jumped on the Zoom, I like squeaked out like "hello," and I was like, "uh-oh." So I guess next time if that happens, I'll talk to myself at least for a while before before the show starts. So how you doing this weekend though? Good to see you.
Oh, I'm good, thanks. We have an event that we have to go to because it's only because of Katie's post that I realized it's at 10 o'clock our time today.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, I would have come in the evening. I mean, I get notifications, but I saw Katie's post on Facebook, and they said, "Oh, let me go back and check."
Oh, very good. Well, I'm glad you could be here. So what road did you choose?
Oh, I wrote the road to somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going through a tough time.
I'm
Tim,
sorry to
in
hear
the
that.
sense it's to write.
Yeah.
So whatever comes, you just try to, fill your quota and write whatever you can. Okay. The road to somewhere. I started out same as everyone else did, to be on the way to somewhere. My parents knew that. My teachers knew that. I kept moving and ending up somewhere else. And I wanted to start being somewhere else. Now my parents are gone. Out of the two, one teacher is gone. I'm exhausted. Most of my hair is gone, in spite of the feeble makeup by the facial hair. Now I'm looking for nowhere, but still keep ending up somewhere else.
I love the riddle-ishness of that last line. Yeah, thanks for writing something. I'm glad you're pushing them out, even though you're having a tough time with the writing. I feel that way too, and then you keep going, and eventually it goes away, I guess. The only problem is when a long time ago I was having a tough time, and I just stopped writing, and then if you don't write, it just keeps getting worse and worse. So I didn't write for a while, for a couple years. Anyway, it's always great to see you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, Biz.
You too. You as well. Get better soon.
Thanks. Yeah.
Good.
That was Biz Mission with The Road to Somewhere. Let's go next to Laura Berg.
Hello.
Hey, Laura. Great to see you.
This has been amazing to hear about all these roads and
I know, it really has. I love all the ones that we have, because we have all these things in common. There are all roads that are special to us or something, and so I love it when we get to hear different, I don't know, being taken to a different place is what I keep coming back to. But I love that aspect of it. So what do you have to share?
I have no hands. No hands. We let go the handlebars and careen down Highway 81, then churn uphill again, jungle cats prowling under our teen shoulders. We're surfers, gusts the waves that arc across our pedals. Our bikes are Appaloosas cantering into the horizon. In glances we drink from spelt lakes, a glacier scratched into the earth's back, and wonder what that feels like. But the upstate sun furrows its brow, lowers its chin, and just in time we pedal home to our suburban suppers, citrine lamplight, hovering mothers, all the itchy threads that stitch us to the family table, where we repeat the words we're meant to say, holding the ones we've grown to mean for when we move away.
That's wonderful. You always have such great lines there. I love that all the itchy threads that stitch us to the family table. Thanks for sharing that, Laura. Yeah, that was Laura Berg with No Hands. Yeah, very cool poem there. And let's go next to Mary Keating.
Hello.
Hey, Mary, great to see you. Well, your
I don't know
camera's
if
off.
you can see me.
I can't yet, but good to hear you.
As you know, I had that bad accident, so I'm sort of in bed, but I'm on my
that's right. I'm so sorry to hear
iPhone.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I fell and I dislocated my shoulder, which I can't use my right arm, which isn't great when you're paraplegic already. So
Oh, yeah. I'm
it's
really
been
sorry to hear that.
challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but Rattle's been so helpful.
Well, thanks. I'm glad.
And I don't know how to take I'm on my iPhone and I'm really an idiot on my iPhone, so I'll just read if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I sent you two versions of the poem, and I think I like it better without the stanza breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So I just made this up. I was just imagining being at the Fire Island Beach, and so this is a made-up poem.
Okay, great.
It's called Wordless. The road began as a series of footprints at the edge of the dune grass, holding the silky white sand made from ground abalone shells. I wouldn't have noticed it, but for catching a mangy black stray dog vanishing into those clouds arising from shimmering homes, conked covet, and the island collected with each high tide, then pounded into powder, soft as a lab's ear. I paused, tentative at first, prone to obey the weathered warning signs posted signs posted promising a $500 fine for walking on the dunes, but curiosity egged me on to follow where the path unfolded. Cool against my sunburned soles, the trail invited me to twist and turn as it wound like a snake deep into the protected land. A mile or so from the shore, the path grew wide enough for a small bicycle to pass. Then one of those red wagons summer people pull their groceries on from the marina where ferries drop them off for a week or two to camp cut off from civilization. Across the field, the dog turned toward me as if he beckoned me all along to follow him. He stopped, sat, waited until I caught up to him, his head bobbing back and forth, with me one horizon, the unknown the other. As I neared, I heard the whimpering of pups. His eyes met mine, and I understood.
Oh, another great ending. I love that ending. Thanks for sharing that. That was Wordless by Mary Keating. And Mary, I hope your recovery goes well and as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Me too. I go to the doctor on Tuesday to find out if I tore my rotator cuff or not. Let's pray I didn't.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
I had a bad separated shoulder diving for a baseball once and couldn't move my arm for I don't know, it was a while. But
I know.
Well. Yeah.
Well, I hope you feel better too. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Take care. It was Mary Keating with Wordless. Let's go next to Jenny.
Hello?
Hey, Jenny. Yeah, great to see you.
Hey. Yeah, I'm pleased I've managed to make it work this time, or at least I think I have. So I have can you hear me?
I can, yeah. I'm looking for the poem. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's Jenny Middleton. That's who you. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Jenny Middleton's here. Great.
I managed to send an email and get my computer to work, and even though I didn't think it was going to, so I kind of feel well.
Yeah, well, another poet. So you're, being in the UK, you can't really participate in the Rattlecast usually because it's like 2 a.m. or something when the open lines come on.
I mean, if it was like a different night, if it was a Friday or a Saturday night, I'd stay awake. But it's because I have to get up Monday morning to work. That's why. But you never know. You might get a late night call from me sometime or some time or other.
Oh, great. Well,
anyway,
glad to have you today. And you've got another Hyben, so we got a bunch of Hyben today, which is cool.
Yeah, I guess because they're about journeys, aren't they? And the prompt kind of led in that direction, didn't it, with it being about a road? So I suppose a lot of people went that way. It's what I did. Shall I read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We watch hand gliders from the South Downs Trail. Glider after glider swoops into the air from distant hills, their silk canopies arcing up and then down into the fields. As the afternoon darkens, your eyes codes the sky's light into their shadows. Roosting birds sing what's left of the day into the branches of spindly trees. Then all I can see is shed pine needles splaying beneath our trainers as we turn and move away. Dry bracken, a broken promise, rough landings.
Yeah, that is very cool. Another great use of the Hyben form, Jenny. I just love seeing Hyben because it works so well for making poetry, move you somewhere. And they're really great, too. It's a good point that a Hyben are a good journey poem because that's the traditional way Hyben came about was, travel diaries of Basho. So really cool to share that. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yep. That was Jenny Middleton with We Watch Hand Gliders from the South Downs Trail. Very neat. I just love going all these places. It's like we're taking a little journey around the world this week. Let's go to Douglas Silver next.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Douglas.
Good
great
luck
to see you.
Katie with the tournament and all that, and all the poets. Good to see you. I emailed one in called Long Layover, and it too is a Hyben.
Another Hyben. Very cool.
The street I grew up on, sort of. Long Layover. I used to tell people I grew up in New York City. This is only a half lie. I moved there, Manhattan to be more precise, when I was 28. So I'm a late bloomer, a slow learner, a better late than neverer. The West Village, to be more precise, that bastion of gay tolerance, make that gay celebration as it should be, even at 3 a.m. outside our second-story window on Christopher Street, between Bleecker Street and 7th Avenue South, with Gloria Gaynor belting out, "I will survive," right there on our stoop, number 84 to be more precise. Some things go right through earplugs. But the words rent control came up after 6 months, rent slashed in half, more than half. And before the landlord could finish explaining, I grabbed a pen with, "Where do we sign?" And this unexpected windfall leading to the question, what do we do now? Back to college, she suggested, be a writer, be a teacher. And to make a short story shorter, I did grow up in New York City on Christopher Street, to be more precise. This is only a half truth. Haiku worthy, maybe, or tanka worthy, I don't know. I haven't counted yet. I haven't even written yet. Pulled from the nest, this bird has flown without looking back.
Well, very
Thank you.
fun, Douglas. Yeah, always a pleasure hearing your work, and I love the reflexive nature toward the end of that poem. Thanks for sharing it.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, that was Douglas Silver with Long Layover. And next, let's go to Mike Bales.
Well, yeah, I'm catching you at a different time today.
Yeah, good to see you, Mike. A different angle of the sun out there.
Yeah. Well, I have to do the light here. If I don't have the light on, I'm kind of in a shadow, even though it's day. This is the highway that I take to my flagging assignments after I pick up a van in Dubuque. From Chicago area, you probably take the interstates. From Dubuque, you take US 151, and for me, that always led to about everything I wanted to see in Wisconsin. So it's called US 151. Every time it takes me from Dubuque into Wisconsin, I dream my other lives. In each time its ribbons of concrete glisten, then cut through stone bluffs. It takes me to Madison, in the main branch of the University of Wisconsin, where I long to get my master's in social work, and I still want to dance on State Street from campus to the Capitol. I want to take it to other highways, quiet motels where I became friends with owners and clerks when finding my way years later. I want to take it again to other highways as they lead to the Nicolet National Forest and listen to a soft wind sing as it caresses branches of trees. And I want to look beyond the crowns to see the sky as it turns gold under the vigilant sun. I want to take US 151 to its end, go beyond and stop at Lake Michigan and the inland sea. One afternoon, I looked over my shoulder and the endless waters glistened on the last day of my last assignment at work.
I love those endless waters glistening. Yeah, very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
That was Mike Bales with US 151. Let's go to Hamat Malak next. It's very early there. Hamat, are you in New Zealand or Australia? I think I said Australia last time, and Katie corrected me but am I right?
No, Australia.
Oh, okay.
It's 4:24.
Yeah, wow. So it's pretty early. Are you up late or early?
Well, it's 4:24 a.m. So I just stayed up.
Oh, really? Oh, I should have thought of that and gone to you first. I'm sorry
That's
about
all
that.
right. No, that's okay. I'm too tired to be embarrassed about how simple my poem is.
Well, that's all right. Well, I'm so glad you could be here, and thanks for staying up with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, it is difficult. I mean, unfortunately, the world being round, there's always some place that's terrible for live. And at this time, it is like the Australia area. So
yeah, normally it's great for me, but no, that's fine.
All right, well.
This is a sonnet.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Yeah, my first sonnet. Oh, first proper one. Fee, fi, fo, fum. At 2, I walk along the path to lunch. Crepe myrtles, pink and red on Rickard Road, drop petals in my hair as if to plunge into my thoughts of hunger uncontrolled. I miss the man outside the doctor's rooms and how he stands a little lost and sad. The lady with the pram that wails and booms is silenced by my rushing hunger mad. My pointed nails scroll deep through menu picks, pinch open for my eyes to feast up close. I don't recall the walk to get my fix, pulled by this ancient urge to chase my nose. The world around me may as well be dead until this gnawing monster gets its bread.
Oh, very nice. Great use of the iambic pentameter there. Fee, fi, fo, fum. Really love the meter and the melody there. Thanks so much for sharing that, Hamat. And I think the screen froze a bit, but great to have you, and hope you get a good night's sleep. Sleep in late today. All right, next to Audrey Friedman.
Hi.
Hey, Audrey, great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Summer gets a little off schedule.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. I understand.
Yeah. Okay, this is East 96th Street, where I grew up. East 96th Street, where energy is the primary color. A man old as Egypt cries, Alte Sachen, old things, rides a wagon down my Brooklyn street, bordered with heavy trunked maples and rows of Sharon. He sells rags, sharpens scissors. His ready for the glue factory horse plods towards Crazy Annette's house and out of view.
Oh, I love the condension of that. Such a tight poem full of great images. Thanks for sharing that, Audrey.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Feel better.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Yeah, it was Audrey Friedman with East 86th Street. And Nancy Tennell is next.
Hi.
Hey, Nancy, good to see you.
Loved that interview.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn, and I really do love that format. It's one of those ones I hope a lot of people, we had a whole issue dedicated to it, and it's a really fun forum. So, yeah.
I got a good guzzle education on things I've been doing wrong. Well, my poem is about the major highway that I lived near growing up, called Dixie Highway.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. And where is that, Dixie Highway?
It's in the southern section of Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up there, it was a sort of lower middle class neighborhood, and since then it has deteriorated some.
Yeah.
So the poem really describes it. I sort of appropriated the way it looks now to when I was growing up there, but it's just a mix of what it was and what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I looked up the history of it to be sure, and that's reflected in the poem. I had no clue until Dixie Highway. I learned to drive on Dixie Highway before it was a testimony to traffic snarl, before it was blighted by hundreds of liquor stores, pawn shops, and a plethora of fast food stops. It was not the Dixie Overland Highway, a plan to connect the West Coast to the East, nor the Dixie Montreal to Miami Highway, with its hope of luring north to south. We watched it decline, not understanding neighborhood demographics, shifts in the economy. Our Dixie was 10 miles between Bethany and Melrose. It was all we needed, a freedom road for the young who like to cruise the streets, singing harmonies with the radio, bodies pulsing to the beat, dreaming of escape from our imagined constrictions, plotting future achievements, developing our convictions. While driving, we talked, sharing righteous opinions, agreeing to reject all the prevailing isms, racism, elitism, and the greed of capitalism. The only good ism for us was pacifism. We practiced adulthood while driving these lanes, our talk big and bold in the privacy of a car. Dixie Highway was our classroom for self-taught lessons on everything we classified as most important. That 10-mile stretch of Dixie is still there, the neighborhood firmly planted on the right. My friends and I seldom return anymore. We relocated by repeatedly turning left. Yeah. Sure.
Hey Tim, how's it going, man?
Hang on, I was on mute again. That's better though. Before I should say again, that was Nancy Tennell with Dixie Highway, and now we have Zachary Honeycutt. Hey Zachary, how you doing?
Hey Tim, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I mean, I had it muted. There's two places I have to mute, so I missed one. But anyway, great to see you. Thanks for sticking around toward the end of the show. What do you got for us this week?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do a prompt from last month, the one going to a place you've always dreamed of, because I had shared that in our group, but I didn't get a chance to read it last month. So I'd like to read that really quick.
Okay, let me try to pull it up. Oh, you just sent it. Okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a little, this one was a little abstract, but it had some sensory images in there. And from my perspective, it was almost like a daydream about going past the horizon and the echo of the horizon and what lied past the horizon, whether it was spiritual or metaphorical. I actually wrote this earlier, inspired by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and then I kind of fit it to Katie's prompt.
Yeah.
So here it is.
Very cool. Okay.
Going out. Sitting in a rocking chair, wind gently knocking back my hair, with birds flying way out there by the horizon. The sun is feeling my hot sorrow. I have won the day, but not the morrow. I've done it all, but beauty borrow. Out there by the horizon. And what I've beheld, I shan't put to rest. This prime portrait of creation can't be a mental pest. For I do not regret seeing what God made best. Out there by the horizon. I am so blessed that my memory can serve to replay scenes of nature that I don't deserve, but I'll be thankful for the quiet glory that awaits my humble reserve. Out there by the horizon. And if heaven is but a state of mind, then hell is the rut of being blind, for so many things majestic lie out there for all mankind. Out there by the horizon.
Oh, very cool, Zachary. I always love your formal poems and the rhymes moving through there. What is that form called? It's similar to like the Raven, where it has the refrain in every last line, and then the rhyme is the same for the first first three lines of the stanza. Is there a word for that?
You know, there probably is, but to be honest, I don't know with this one. This was one of my early poems that I wrote when I was just finding myself as a writer, and so I never really did the research on this one, but I'm sure there is, but just being honest, man, I don't know with this particular one. Yeah.
Very cool. I have to look that up later because I'm curious. It's a form I've seen before in a few places. It must have a name, and it is one that Edgar Allan Poe uses frequently. So I wonder if there's a word for that. But anyway, thanks so much for sharing that, Zach. Really fun.
Well, I know. I mean, there might be some Anapest in there. It almost feels like that with the beat of it. I know that. I can tell you that just from the sound of it. To me, it sounds like that. It almost sounds like what was it? You know, the Annabelle Lee poem or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sorry you're feeling sick, Tim. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, well, it's definitely I'm on the downslope, so we're good. Thanks for saying that, though, Zach, and good to see you as always.
See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Yep, that was Zachary Honeycutt with Going Out, and next we have Mary Lisa D. Diminishes.
Hello.
Hey, Mary. Yeah, thanks so much for being here and sticking around.
Oh, no problem.
Outside too.
Yes, on my porch.
Very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's warm. It's humid. So yeah, the poem that I wrote. I'm at the shore now, but I grew up in the northeast mountains of Pennsylvania, the Poconos, and I used to have to drive down this gigantic swirling hill to get home in the snow. One year, I decided that I would go a different way, and so I went an exit past where I needed to go, and it was actually steeper and snowier. So that's where this poem came from. It was so scary. Yeah, but I
I've
was
definitely been in
fearless back
situations
then.
like that where it's a little hairy up in the mountains.
It totally is. I
definitely
just came back from New Mexico, actually. So yeah, we were driving the arid mountains as opposed to the humid mountains last week, my son and I.
Oh, cool.
So that was a lot of fun. Let me pull this poem up. Where did you go? Okay, Route 309. I'll never be as light as I was then, half the age I am now, young on the hill in Hazleton, driving down into the valley in deep snow toward what I once called home. Now I'm never homesick, and I know the little red car I drove so long ago I thought I missed isn't what I missed or longed for later. It was the oblivion of knowing what it was to want with little regard for danger, the assuredness, even in a blizzard, my body would retain control, even snowblind with no one to follow, thin brakes, and only my headlights to guide me. The first thing you need to know, my father said when he taught me to drive, is the car is a weapon. You control the car doesn't control you. It's the freedom, too, that I miss, the weightlessness of youth, the pleasure of looking forward without having much to look back at. Now I'm full with memory, sick. My stomach boxy at the idea of her scorning eyes, and I never want to meet them again, never want to go home. Here, let me introduce you to my mother. After my father is dead 18 years, her sister gone 6, and no one left to keep her in check, no one there for her to answer to, no one to disclose to her how fully out of control she is. And where my car holds and shields me, sings to me, and in unison with my body, propels me forward, the mother stalls, sputters, dies out, leaving me stranded on the side of the road, but not before a long bang. Not before she rams me against a wall one last time. It's not you I worry about, said my father. It's the other drivers.
Yeah, definitely experienced that a lot. Mary Lisa, there's this one road here in Wrightwood, even like not even, on its own in the middle of nowhere, but where every time it snows, there's like a pile of cars at the bottom that are just slid backwards into each other, and it's like tow trucks getting them all out of the way, So it's rough up in the mountains. Yeah, really cool poem and nice reverie on driving too. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yep, that was Mary Lisa D. Diminishes. And that's going to wrap up the Zoom portion of the show. Let me see. I think as long as my voice holds up, I'll read a couple extra poems too. Ted Guevara has a poem. He's a poem on a street, is what his email says. He says, there's a real Western Avenue in Marion, Indiana, and it's more subdued than the one in the poem. I had my first employment there and learned to embrace routine. But as always, no matter how conservative the town is, youth always takes it to another level. That's what Ted says about this. And as always, he includes a photo, which I'll show here. So it's interesting for those, it's an eye, like a very close-up of an eyeball, but the eye is a record player. So a very interesting photo, and here is Ted's poem. Phono killed the wayward star. So sharp was the turn on Western Avenue. Rebel stage, yet Western Avenue was where I first fell in and conformed. Wise in, dumb out, black shiny disc she was, going round and round in the district of safety, in the calmness of music. Grooves of depth she had been. If I had car, I couldn't accelerate and dare the curves, for there were none. I lingered soft vinyl around me in awkward happiness, but I swerved in independence of youth. I scratched out and skipped out. I couldn't get back in. Stung by the idea that had been the straight and narrow, I couldn't lounge in the satisfaction. So keen are my thoughts of Western Avenue, Western Avenue, Western Avenue. A very cool poem. Phono killed the wayward star. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. Let's see, who else was... let's read Dick Westheimer's poem. And then his was Elegy. And Dick, I know, is... he's got a lot of family visiting, but then he also has a conference that he does. I can't remember the name of it, but he drives a bit. He's driving back home after the weekend conference, I believe, right now. His poem for this week, did he have a note about it? Actually, this is, yeah. So this was, this was the Elegy prompt. So it's an older prompt. Let's read this by Dick. Oop, wrong one. There we go. Elegy to an answering machine. Remember, this was last week's prompt, to write an elegy to an object in your home. Elegy to an answering machine. I suspect your parts are scattered to the world of uses, metal gone, where metal goes, the plastic parts of you to the dump, the welcome message I voiced on 8-inch microtape, gone to dust. Leave a message, I recorded, with great faith that when anyone called, you'd speak for me. Was this a welcoming? An imperative? Just the rules we'd all agree upon? I tapped the button that said play and hear my father's voice distorted. Wow, they called it when the tape speeds and slows like a near-sprung watch right before it stops. I assembled you, screw by screw, and find the rubber belt that drives your capstan distended, and I, with the care of a surgeon, wind the stout rubber band around your pulleys. The next message left by my sister, I think, is faithfully rendered. I wish I'd fixed you before my father called that day before he died. I'd have saved the cassette, marked it with the word Pops, placed it in my catch-all drawer in the kitchen, and forgotten about it until today when I'd turn the plastic cartridge gently in my hands and wish I'd not thrown you away. Yeah, great poem there. Elegy to an Answering Machine. And yeah, those physical objects, we sort of lose something when they become digital, like everything is now. And there's actually a tangible thing. I actually have a drawer back at the file cabinet in Studio City where Rattle's office technically is, and it's full of old microcassette tapes of interviews with poets, like from back the really old ones. And at some point, I think like digitizing them so I can get to them again. I don't have any player for it though. Anyway, that was Dick Westheimer with Elegy to an Answering Machine. Thanks for sharing that, Dick, and I'll probably be back more next week. I think the busyness is going by the wayside. Let's see. I think. Okay, let's do one more. Hang on one second. Okay, let's do. Bob Bradshaw asked us to read this. He was here for a bit and couldn't keep up. So this is Bob Bradshaw, The Path Wide Enough for Two. We'll read this one too, and then we'll wrap up the show. The Path Wide Enough for Two. Emily often left pressed flowers between the pages of poems she thrust eagerly into Susan's hands. They were offered into her sister-in-law's hands as lovingly as poems sent to chosen editors, like fervent prayers. There was always an intensity about Emily, like the moment when someone sits down at the piano, its keys aching to be touched. She left Susan's heart waiting like shutters flung open as she hurried out of her house. Susan, waiting for her, the trodden grass between the homestead and evergreens as worn and loved as Emily's volume or Elizabeth Barrett's poems. And wide enough for two, like a poem between reader and poet, a pathway to be revisited again and again. Really nice ending there. That was, I think it was for an older prompt. That was The Path Wide Enough for Two by Bob Bradshaw. And that's going to wrap up the prompt lines for tonight. Let's go to the Sciku for this week. And the Sciku is inspired by this story. Again, I like to do the Sciku because there's news that's not politics. And it's really fun to write poems about other news stories too. So even though a lot of stuff is political, and but it's nice to write other things. So I like to do a little Sciku at the end of the show to bring some other news to the forefront. And this is the story I picked. Extinct humans survived on Tibetan plateau for 160,000 years. And so scientists have found this remains of Denisovians over 3,000 meters. So that's like 10,000 feet above sea level in the Tibetan plateau. There's a cave there, and you can see the cave on the screen. And they found a whole bunch of, a few bones, and then all the evidence of what they were eating too, living there for so long. So I was thinking about that, and here is the Sciku based on this really cool discovery. The Sciku is this right here. There we go. Plastic, our Denisovian cave. It should be Denisovan. Sorry, wrote that at the last minute. Plastic, our Denisovan cave. There you go. That is your Sciku for the week, and that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Now, Katie Dozier, of course, is running off to play in her poker tournament, the World Series of Poker. If you catch any of that, if there's a way you can watch on Poker Go, it's possible she's on some video today. She's got a good table. So she can't share this prompt, but next week's prompt by Katie is going to be this. And there we go. Write a traditional ghazal that references at least one other poet. And when submitting, please include the name of the poets referenced in the submission note. And so, as Maaz Bin Bilal did, today's guest, referencing other poets sometimes. We're going to do that. And Katie wants to make sure you put it in the note when you submit it, so that basically she knows that you're actually writing for this prompt and not just any random ghazal. So write a traditional ghazal, and that includes, each line, basically the rules of a traditional ghazal. Each couplet is distinct, so they don't go from one to another. They live in their own world. They're isolated units. And then there's a rhyme and a refrain. And the rhyme is sort of buried behind the refrain. And then I think a little more loosely, but self-reference yourself at the end. And also include references to other poets, too, throughout the ghazal. So there you go. It's a pretty complicated prompt, but really fun after learning so much about ghazals with Maaz Bin Bilal. Should be fun to try writing your own. So that was sort of an obvious pick that we wanted to do. And that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for being here on the early time. I was a little worried. I always am if we have a different time that, no one will show up. But it was a really wonderful show, and we had excellent poets on the prompt lines, too. So thanks for being here. Now, next week's guest in the Rattlecast, we are back to our regular time, and we have the return of Carrie Gunter Seymour. Carrie was on over 2 years ago. Not sure which episode it was, but it was maybe around 150 or something like that. She is here again with a new book, Dirt Songs. And Carrie is one of our favorite poets. She's such a warm and fun, positive personality. We just love having Carrie Gunter Seymour on. So it's really cool to share her next book. And we're always, as always, if we have a repeat guest, we're going to find stuff to talk about. And hey, actually, Katie just popped on. So, hey, Katie.
Hey, I'm here. Do you want to see it?
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh, wow. That is a crowded room full of poker aficionados.
It's like a hallway, and they haven't opened the tables back up, so everybody's pounding on the doors to get in. Oh, yeah. I got a ride from a stranger here, so that was fun also. Wow.
Well, you're having quite the adventure there in Las Vegas. We already shared the prompt poem, but it's a good prompt for next week, but it's a good one. So thanks for writing that out. We're looking forward to it. Anything you want to add about it?
That I hope everybody has a lot of fun writing it. I think that the episodes leading up to this was perfect to prepare for it. So you guys did a great job talking about ghazals. I'm going to have to watch it again just so I can do the prompt too.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Well, it's great to see you. And everybody will wish you good luck. And because, you can do all you can do, and then you got to get some luck too. So we hope you have good luck.
Yeah, I do. But thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks to all the warm wishes from everybody today too.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye. That was Katie Dozier, our prompt poems editor. And then once again, so next week's guest will be Carrie Gunter Seymour. That's Rattlecast number 253. Sunday, July 14th, the regular time, back to the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.